Tonight, in a growing number of COVID hotspots around the country, fear is spreading as fast as the virus. The lines for testing from dawn to dusk.
I was online for 5.5 hours.
The rush to be tested, and often the long wait for results, comes amid another record-smashing day for new coronavirus cases. In 39 states, infections are on the rise. The crushing toll on our country, no different than the original peak of the pandemic in April, say experts.
I have a fan going and the door open and 3 kids in the house and my wife working, so hopefully we don't have a lot of extra sounds.
Yeah. Well, in the post-COVID, or I guess it's not even the post-COVID, the COVID
it's the current.
Yeah. It seems as though the threshold for like quality conferencing is kind of like, there's an understanding that the threshold should be not as high as it could.
Yeah, that it should be the understanding. My friend Jay, who's a filmmaker, has he's hooked up his Red camera to his computer and does all his Zoom calls on a Red. And he looks amazing. He sent us screenshots of what his Zoom conferences look like, and everyone else looks like they're on their phones, and he's like perfectly in focus and sharp with this dynamic range, and everything behind him is, I mean, it's like, it looks fantastic. So he's figured out how to make it work. Even with all the, I'm sure, there's a lot of buffering on the Zoom call as well. So we still managed to make it look good. I guess so. At least he's figured out a way to make it look really good. I don't know. Maybe he's, it's the compression still like, it's compressed, but it still looks better. I don't know. Right. Yeah. It could be sharper, but compressed or something. Yeah. Well, and maybe it looks sharper just because he's in focus, and everything else behind him is blurry. And then maybe it's got like maybe it's at like an f2 aperture or something where, it's really like, even if it's not really sharp, it looks sharper just because of the fact that everything's blurry behind him. So yeah, probably is. Yeah. I did one of these with Martin Heck a couple of months ago, and he was like, we were going back and forth like a couple of weeks prior, and he like really wanted it to look good. It's really funny doing these podcasts with all these like time lapse guys, because it's like everyone is super neurotic about looking good. Yeah, I literally just cleaned my office 5 minutes ago and was like, oh, I probably should have been thinking about this more. We're doing an addition on our house, and so there's like some boxes and things that have ended up in my office because we lost a storage room, and we're have to put things back in another closet when it's done and all this stuff. So my office is just a mess. And I was gone for like on and off for a couple months. Not gone for 2 months, but for the last couple of months I've been kind of gone. And when I come back, all I've been doing is working on footage and getting work done, and not really other stuff, unless it's been with the house. Been doing that. So I bet, man. I mean, the stuff that you do, first of all, thanks for coming on, man. Let's get that out of the way. Sorry it took so long. It's tough for, sometimes when I'm like, oh yeah, that'll work. And then all of a sudden it comes and I'm tired, or I'm working on something else. I'm like, I just can't, but it was really tough to coordinate, being on the road and all that, trying to figure out a good time. So appreciate you waiting. So no worries. To be here. No worries. It is. I have noticed that kind of since, like early mid-June, it is getting a little bit harder to just get 2 people on the same page, because now that things are starting to kind of open up and people are starting to get back into the groove a little bit. Yeah. Well, and things have opened up, but I mean, here in Arizona, it's chaos right now. I mean, with at least cases going up, and we know lots of people really close to us. Where my wife works, she works at a church, and people there have contracted it. Some other friends of ours, some guy that, we just saw like at our house like 5 days ago, suddenly he doesn't feel good today, but he probably might have caught it after. I mean, just don't know. But like, it seems like everybody we know is starting to catch it. Luckily, it seems like nobody's really dying from it, and the symptoms have not been bad for like everybody we know. It's all been, either quick or just like a weak fever, stuff like that. So it feels definitely more real here. So we're just, even, there's storms this week, and one of them, a couple of days ago was up in the target would have been Montana, Rapid City area for a couple of days in a row. And then yesterday, amazing tornado in Minnesota. And I'm, it's an 18-hour drive to get to Montana from my house. And I'm like, I'm not about to get on the plane right now because that just seems to be foolish,
right?
To do that. Even though I did fly, multiple times this spring, it was, a little bit more spaced out on Southwest. And I hear other airlines are not doing that as much anymore. And maybe Southwest isn't. And I'm like, it's just not, with all the cases going up, I don't want to get on a plane now. Before, it seemed like it wasn't as bad. So, I could do it for an hour and 45-minute flight to Denver, like not that big a deal, but now it doesn't seem right. And then driving to, I don't know, 18 hours is a lot, and I'm exhausted kind of from the spring. And usually this is when I chase the monsoon here in Arizona. It starts generally end of June. And I actually got on a storm like a day or two after I got back, and it was great. And now it's dead for like 10 days. And so I'm sitting here not wanting to go out there because I didn't really want to drive and I didn't want to be away from my family anymore. We got this house edition going on. There's always decisions all the time, and I like being here. But in the meantime, I have nothing to chase here. So I'm watching these tornadoes and these storms that are happening now, of course, in July, where none of these tornadoes happened the entire time we were out there. They all waited to July when everybody was like exhausted. And so some few people that are still out there chasing the diehards are getting their stuff now. So it's a little bit tough. I usually don't care this time of year when I miss stuff out there.
Right.
I'm like, well, I would never have been to Minnesota anyway. So what am I? I'm not going to be bummed about it. But considering there's no storms right now, I'm trying to argue with myself, like, why, if I have nothing to do, why aren't I out there? But
yeah,
but in my line of work, there's not a ton of chasers that have like families and stuff. There's a lot of younger single like kind of people that are out there. So it's a little bit trickier. I love my wife and kids. I like to be here. And especially now with everything going on, everyone's home all day. We got
right.
It's kind of like we're hunkered down, and my wife has been working at home now for a couple of weeks because of, the couple of cases at her job. And so, so I don't know. It's kind of, I'm happy. I'm glad I'm here, but missing the storms kind of sucks when there's nothing happening near my house, which is usually like the relief this time of year.
Yeah. It makes sense. I mean, it's like, I think any photographer, whether they do storm chasing or just chasing sunsets or whatever can relate to the FOMO of like, someone posted something on Instagram and sun totally burned and everything's pink. And you're like,
yeah,
motherfucker,
like you dude, the tornado photos and the videos from yesterday in Minnesota were some of the best tornado footage ever shot. I mean,
wow,
it was like a drill bit tornado that was about 50 to 100 feet away from them, like 100 feet in a field. And you could look straight up and you could see where it was connecting, like the elephant trunk going into the cloud. And so some guy 14 millimeter shot with the road, the tornado about 100 feet off, and you can see all the way up into where it connects into the cloud base. It's one of the best tornado photos like probably ever shot.
Wow.
And the footage is just, the guy steps out of his car and it's right freaking there. There's debris flying around. You see it ripping up a field and carving a path through, and it's not very big. It was like literally like, looked like 4 feet wide, like path on the ground, but it's still at the top. It's gigantic. Anyway, so you're sitting here looking at this going, I would never be there. And so there's no reason to be upset about it yet. I'm still upset about it.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Well, you can't help it, man. I mean, you do amazing stuff and you've been doing amazing stuff for a long time. And, I'm sure that must still eat away at you despite all the good stuff that you've done,
Yeah. I mean, I had a fantastic spring in terms of like shooting supercells, like structure. I mean, I don't think I might have been late to like a storm or two and didn't do the best I could have on a storm just because of road networks and decisions you make when you're out there. But overall, like if people were ranking the structures of the year, like when we chase and we get on a good structured storm that everyone remembers, all you have to say is like sublet and everyone knows exactly what storm you're talking about. Or like a couple of years ago, if you say Imperial or like, or any tornado, Campo, everyone knows exactly what you're talking about without having to put a date out or anything. So this year, there were multiple days like that. There was Sublet, there was Ulysses, there was Crawford, there was Arnold. I'm trying to think of a couple others, but there was just really good structure days. And I think for the most part, I was in every single one of those storms and didn't miss any of the best storms this year, which is a very, very rare thing. So I'm like knocking on wood and hoping my streak like stays alive next year. So I had a really good year in that regard, even waiting for a storm all day that didn't go off until the sun was like practically set. Then it exploded finally, and being on there with only like 10 other chasers in Oklahoma, which is rare. And it was amazing at night. Like it just didn't even move. It spun, it had structure. This new film I'm putting out next week, it's at the very, very end. And you just see it like come across at night flashing and lightning bolts. I mean, it was, and so and maybe I wouldn't have been there like other times, but anyway, so I had that, I feel like I had like such a successful like year in that regard, but there were no tornadoes at like any time. Like we saw one little teeny little brief land spout that didn't connect, a little funnel, a little dust on the ground. It was just, that was it. That was my best thing all year. So the last couple of years I've been able to put out films where you see like tornadoes like churning and stuff. And so it was one of those things where I was like, well, I'm not going to put out a film, this year or whatever, because I want it to be really, really good.
Yeah.
And, I like to have tornadoes in it, and I want it to be, and other people are trying to, it's not, I don't know if it's like a competitive field, but there are people out there that are trying to do it too, more and more. And so I'm trying to do my best to like, stay ahead, or at least do the best I can possibly do, which is, my last film last year, I waited 2 years to get 2 years of footage to put it out. And that's why I ended up with like, quite a few different tornado like time lapses in it. But
that's
this year,
Reverent or the Monsoon
Vorticity 2.
Oh,
Vorticity 2.
Okay.
It took 2 years to kind of shoot all that, and in 2018, I had a couple of tornadoes. I had this Tescott wedge tornado, was fantastic. I had a couple twin tornadoes that is at the very end of that film. And then, but then I didn't put anything out. I'm like, you know what? It wasn't a great year for structure. I got some tornadoes. I'm going to wait to see what 2019 brings. And 2019 was great. And I had like a really great tornado in Texas, and then another one in Nebraska. And I'm like, well, freaking, I got like 4 or 5 tornadoes now to be able to put at the end of this thing. Plus we had some really great structure last year too. So I was able to put a film together of just my best work of the last 2 years. And, for me, like it took a lot of, patience and willpower to not even want to put anything out, because I do that. This is like kind of my business, is putting these things out there. People see them, companies will want to license them. And that's just kind of how like I started doing this in the first place, was kind of putting time lapses out there. A couple of them went viral, so I got really lucky with that early on. But when I would put these films together and put them to music and things like that, early on they would get, they get staff picks. They would end up on, Petapixel and DIY and like all these websites. They would end up on even bigger ones. Sometimes I get some news coverage locally, and then people, would see those, like, hey, I saw your video. We're making, a documentary. We need some footage. And it just, so for me to like sit on footage is kind of tough, because I want to get it out there. I want people to see it and go, wow, here's some new stuff that we can use. Cause there's tons of these shows that are like Planet Earth and BBC shows and nature shows that are always looking for new, fresh things. And so anyway, so it's tough for me to sit on stuff. And so this year, that was the plan again, was to sit on stuff and wait till chasing 2021 in the planes and seeing what I get. But as I started rendering everything, I'm like, man, I had a really good spring and I have a lot of good stuff. And if I sit on this for a year and then next year is decent, I don't know how I'm going to do a film with all this footage. As it is, the one I put together now is like 9 minutes long.
Right.
So I don't know what I would have cut. So anyway, so I'm like, I'm just going to put one out. I don't care. It's a weird year anyway. I feel like people need like entertainment or something to look at. There's not a lot. There's no movies coming out. There's no sports, or very, very little sports.
Yeah.
And, so I'm like, I need to throw something out there, I think, just for my sanity. And I love making them. So.
Yeah, I bet, man. I mean, it always looks like you're having a blast when you're doing them. And I think you're totally right about the discipline to not put stuff out. And that's something that I struggle with, and presumably everybody struggles with, at least the people that really care and are really all in on, trying to make a career out of this kind of thing, is like there's the constant pressure, especially if you're known on like YouTube, like you are, and social media platforms to like, you know, it's like on one hand, you have to keep putting stuff out there because, you know, the algorithm is only going to sort of support the people that are producing the most stuff. But at the same time, it's like, but what if this is mediocre? So it's like you're constantly trying to raise the bar from the last viral thing you did. But, you know, it's like where, you know, how do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah. And I mean, that's what I struggle with all the time. Even to the point I struggle that I'm like, do I even want to do this anymore? Because I don't know what else I can do. Like, I don't know. In my brain, I'm like, I'm not like a super creative person. I don't think I can just sit around and come up with just freaking great ideas. I mean, I see these, you know, what's his name? Jeremy Cowart, the big time photographer. Trying to make sure, I don't know why I couldn't remember his name, but I feel like every time I see him, he's doing something creative. You know, during this like pandemic, he started coming up with these cool portraits he was doing with people over phone. And then when these protests started, he was doing some amazing like portraits of people protesting and all these different things. And I'm like, the guy's always thinking, he's always creative. He's always doing something kind of new and different and fresh. And I'm like, I don't have that, you know, and I do something that I really, really love, because this for me started from something that I was, you know, I would have done all this for free. And then, I mean, this is something you couldn't, I mean, I've loved the weather since I was a little kid. I always wanted to share it with people. I wanted to tell people storms were coming. Like, it's just kind of something that I've always wanted to do. And so now I found an avenue to, you know, the best way I can share it with people. Like, this is almost like what's always been a part of me. I mean, I got made fun of by friends because I called them up and said like a storm was incoming. Like, all I said was incoming. They would make fun of me for years after that, you know, and I just, for some reason, I wanted to share it with people, to share like how much I love it with other people who maybe don't, you know it as well, or don't enjoy it as much as me, but like I want them to. So these films and what I've done has been a way, I think, that I, you know, almost unconsciously figured out a way to share it with everybody, what I love about it. Yeah. And so I'm doing that, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know what to do after this. You know, I know my friend Dustin Farrell's got a $150,000 Phantom Flex and he's doing all this great slow-mo lightning. I'm like, well, I can't just go get one of those and copy him. That would be stupid. You know, I respect him and he does something great. And I also can't afford to buy a camera like that. And I'm like, so sometimes it's a little draining to figure out, what am I going to do next? Like, is this, you know, am I going to do this for the next 10 or 15 years, or what else can I do? And so that's, you know, that's been why I've saved up. You know, I was started the thing going, yeah, I'm going to save up footage for a couple of years. Like this monsoon now, which is not even happening. I didn't do a film last year, but I got really good footage, especially the second half, because it was a crappy storm season, but the second half was great. I got some really dynamic, dramatic like scenes, and but I didn't get a lot of good dust storms. So I'm like, I don't want to put out a monsoon film with one wall of dust. Like, that's just not a monsoon film, right? And so I'm like, I got to wait to see what this year offers. And so it's the same kind of thing where I'm like, I'm not going to just put something out kind of subpar just to do it, because I'm like, I know that unless I do the best I can, it's gonna, either other people are going to start doing it and either, you know, not copy, but, you know, doing the same thing. And I want mine to stand out. I want to be, you know, I'm proud of what I do. And, you know, I'm a competitive person inside, and I want my stuff to be the best it can possibly be. And, cool. But it's kind of a mental game that you play with yourself at the end of last year, 2 years to put Vorticity 2 together. At the end, I'm like, I don't know what to do next. Like, I'm like, am I going to wait 3 years for my next film so it can top everything anyone's ever seen? But here we are, and I shot only one spring, and I'm like, man, I got a lot of good stuff. I'm going to put something out there. Why not? Coronavirus needs, people need to watch something, so I'm just going to do something. So. True. I think you're right. I think you probably do need to consider, maybe think a little bit outside the box in terms of like, you know, maybe I can undercut myself slightly given the time, or like maybe you have to pay attention to sort of the conditions in society to know like, hey, you know what, maybe this is the right time for X or Y. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, man, it's really cool to hear you talk about all this stuff. I have not really
had much chance to do a lot of storm stuff because I just don't really live in a great area for it. And frankly,
Where do you live?
I live in the Philadelphia area.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So like we'll get some stuff at the shore, you know what I mean? You can see from the beach, but it's like you don't really have much ability to, get in front of anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Kind of sort of where you are.
Yeah.
But man, like when I first got into like landscape stuff, it was all because of I saw some viral Milky Way image, and that was kind of what set me on the path of doing like night sky, and that became like my biggest passion for shooting. And I think that a lot of times when you get really inspired by something, you kind of maybe foolishly or not, you end up kind of, well, how do I just replicate that thing? So you get on this path of like, how do I end up copying that person? And then maybe as you start to develop and get better, then you start, man, that's lame. Like, I don't want to just, copy that person. And it's interesting to hear you talk about how that, that's always a concern in what you're doing as well.
I think I'm a pretty like just nice. I think I'm a nice overall guy, but I'm competitive. I was watching this Michael Jordan documentary, and you watch some of these people out there that are, athletes and stuff. And I'm not even comparing myself to that. I didn't even bring that up, but hearing how competitive he was, where if anyone did anything, he used it as motivation to be better than them. He wanted to just be the best. And so I think like that, that's kind of a natural thing for all of us sometimes, is to be competitive and want to just be the best at what we do. And so I think for me, it's like that. I want to, I in a lot of this, I know I saw some time lapses and storm stuff before, probably from like this guy, Stephen Locke, that I know. But I didn't see like a ton of this stuff, like maybe one or two before, so I started doing, I felt like, at least for the monsoon part of it, no one was doing anything like that out here. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I kind of felt like I kind of started doing something out here that no one had ever done. Now there's a lot more people, doing this. I mean, there was a local news channel on Instagram, Channel 15, posting, oh, don't you love the monsoon? It's all these monsoon time-lapse clips. And someone tagged me, Mike, these are great. And I'm like, those aren't mine. And they're like, really? They look like yours. And I'm like, I know. They do. Yeah. I go, I don't really know who shot them, but it wasn't, it's not my stuff. And that wouldn't have been around like 7 years ago. And so I mean, in my brain, I worry like, okay, I do this now, a bunch of other people do this. So now is it unique anymore? Is it interesting? So either I need to do something else and not do it anymore and figure out something else to do, or I need to figure out how to do it better. And so for me, it's just the better is just, I probably chase harder, and more motivated and go further than other people. Just, I mean, not everybody. I definitely have some friends like my buddy John. I mean, we will freaking chase to the end of the earth on a night and never go to sleep if there's still storms up. Like there's other people out there like that. But if you're passionate about something like this, you don't ever, you chase until you're, kind of dead out here. And that's how you get the best stuff. You're everywhere. You chase as much as possible. I mean, I was like one of two people on a storm the other night, south of Phoenix, that just randomly popped up. I almost went home, and in my brain, all I wanted to do was go home because I'd been down to Tucson, nothing great. Driving home, I see some storms, and I'm like, I'm tired. I just want to go home like right now. My brain wasn't into it, but something didn't let me go home. I'm like, hey, it's 50 minutes to sunset. There's still a storm going. I'll mosey on over. Like, why wouldn't I? Like, I need to see what's going to happen. Yeah. And I pull up there, have the storm, and it just drops a microburst right in front of me. And it's orange from the sun. The sun is just about to go down. Just a blob of rain crashes to the ground, and all of a sudden dust just explodes from the microburst. And I'm just like freaking out. I'm like, I almost went home. And this is like probably going to be one of my, like, this would be at the end of a film kind of clip, because it's just so much drama happening. And so I think that's kind of what it takes a lot, is when you're tired and you want to go home, but you don't. You got to stay for one more thing to see what might happen, because you don't know what you're gonna miss. And so I think that's like maybe the one like thing that I kind of have that drives me to, maybe try to, rise above and try to stay ahead, is that I kind of have an unending drive for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, you have to. I mean, especially, I mean, to your point about everyone's kind of getting good at doing stuff like this. It's so true. I mean, you've got, first of all, camera technology is just constantly getting better and better. And it's becoming more, accessible. Like you can get good stuff for not that much money now. And, like the internet, love it or hate it, I guess, like all this information on how to do things is becoming more and more accessible. So you've got, it could be an online tutorial that only costs $100 or $200, and a lot of stuff from that. You don't have to necessarily be out for years and years. Although I would still make the case that that's the better experience for sure.
Well, in time lapsing weather and stuff specifically, it's definitely you have to be really disciplined. It's not the same as, there's obviously a ton of people doing like landscape, Milky Way kind of time lapses, hyperlapses of like cities and things like that. You see a lot of that stuff everywhere, but storms it's different. You have to be willing to, especially chasing supercells and stuff, the planes, you have to have the ability to just drive for hours, 8-9 hours to get to a target, be in the right place, set up your camera and hang in there for a storm and try to get a good clip, and there's so many times where I pull up and I'm like, this isn't a good spot. I have to move. Or I see something amazing and I'm like, I can't shoot it here because I'm in a town, or there's trees, or there's something that I don't like. And I have to make the decision that I'm going to keep driving until I find the perfect place. And then you have to stop and wait for it to get close to you. You actually have a clip that's at least, shoot for 5 minutes at so there's just it takes a little bit of more of a discipline than if you're just a lot of chasers and people out there, they out for stills, video of tornadoes and stuff, and they can stop, take some stills and drive another mile, stop, take some stills, drive another mile. And for me, I've got to be someplace and I might be there right when the structure's getting good and then have to move another 10 minutes and miss something spectacular maybe that happened while I was moving because I've got to get far enough ahead to shoot it again. And so there's just a whole, but when I got a tornado a couple years ago, it was way in my favor because I went way ahead of it to wait so we get the structure. And as we're time lapsing it, just wrapped up, dropped the tornado, went right across us, and then disappeared. And we're like, well, I couldn't have gotten anything better than that if I ever tried again. So right. So anyway, but it's a little bit of a discipline. So not only do you kind of have to have that drive to go out and chase these storms unending, because weather is, you want to shoot the Milky Way for the most part, as long as it's going to be clear skies, you pretty much can go out and shoot it. Nothing's going to stop you unless there's clouds up there.
Yeah, you go to sleep.
I
do it all the time.
You can set it up and sleep. I've been in Death Valley, set up a camera to shoot the Milky Way across the salt flats, and then I went and slept in the car. It's just, that's different than chasing storms. So you have to have a crazy drive. You're going to get exhausted, and you have to be really disciplined with what you're shooting, and
totally
can be draining.
Yeah. It's funny because as a time-lapse photographer, you really kind of do have to predict the future, much more so than I think any other type of photography. And especially I think with time-lapse, you are extra invested in what might happen to your exposure in a minute or two. It to people that maybe sort of don't know what the hell I'm talking about. It's if I'm shooting into a black storm, but I want to get the storm as it dissipates, well, you better be ready to have some super blown highlights unless you underexpose that. And it's you must be so good at that at this point of just kind of knowing I
mess up sometimes, but for the most part, I know if a storm is distant and I have one exposure, I know by the time it gets to me, it's going to be darker. It's just automatic, unless it's a weird storm like we had in Nebraska where the sun, it was really bright behind it no matter what. It was nothing behind it. So the sun was just coming out all the time. And so at that point, you just forget about it. You're well, if it's blown out, it's blown out at this point. There's nothing I can do. My camera can only do so much. But yeah, as these storms are coming closer, I'm, adjusting the shutter speed to keep the exposure balanced. And you fix it later in light or time lapse and stuff, but it's
right.
But you have to, because otherwise, if you forget about it and it gets dark, suddenly you're trying to bump up your exposure +2 and you introduce noise or do something because you're you're not paying attention. So it's definitely kind of like it's crazy because I usually shoot 2 cameras doing time lapse on a really good storm and another one doing stills. And so I'm kind of running back and forth to make sure they're all balanced, and also, lightning trigger on the other one, trying to shoot and like, is it, aiming and I've messed up, and that's the tough part is time lapse of discipline. And you sit there and you set your camera up and you got to let it go. And you kind of, for the most part, pray you're right. Sometimes I've been like, okay, this is bad. I gotta stop in the middle and readjust the camera. But a lot of times if you do that, you end up with nothing because you just did like 120 exposures of a storm and then you realize you weren't aimed in the right place. Then you change it again and then you get like 200 and all of a sudden the hail starts falling. You got to go and you're like, if I would have just left it alone, I would at least have 300 exposures right now. And that happened this year. We were in Nebraska and we drive up to the storm and it's like a mothership and there's just mammatus above it that people were crying about. I mean, the tour guest I had with me was practically in tears a couple of times on our trip. She's from Seattle. She doesn't see it very much. She was practically in tears with the mammatus. And I aimed my camera to get this supercell just on the left side of the frame, knowing that I thought it was going to kind of come across in front of us, but it came more towards us. So the left edge of the supercell started kind of going off frame. And I had aimed I have 11 to 24, I aimed so wide with mammatus. And it was like, that part was great. But as I'm watching it, I'm sitting here going, the structure is more over here. I should have aimed more left and had the left edge more, not on the very edge, just technical stuff. And I watched it come through and I had, I decided to do an Instagram live at the time, which social media and doing that stuff sometimes really messes you up. So I'm doing live.
I remember the one you're talking about, by the way. I remember that one.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. So I remember you freaking out about the
mammatus above. Yeah. So I'm freaking out and I realize I don't have my Sony on a tripod. So I'm doing Instagram live and I set my ISO to like 1,000 just so I can do some handheld shots of the storm with the Sony, because all of a sudden in the back of my head, I realized my time-lapse camera that I usually do stills from is not aimed in the best place for a still later, because I'm not going to get this whole like structure in the left side. And man, when I got in the car and I looked at the time lapse and we're driving, for an hour, I was like depressed. I was upset. I was like, I had my buddy Brett and Christy, my tour guests with me. And I was just like, I'm like, I just had one of the best structures of the year and I blew it. Like I just should have aimed more left, or I should have realized my mistake. And I shouldn't have been on Instagram. Now, like my Sony's the only good photo I have. And I was at ISO 1,000, which I don't care what anyone says about, Sony. I love it, but I mean, ISO 1,000 is going to have more noise in it than ISO 100, and it does. And they're a little bit grainier than I want them to be. And I should, anyway, so it took me a while to just kind of get over it and be like, it's still not a bad time lapse. I had a really good year. It doesn't look as bad as I thought it did, but I had a couple of moments like that this year where I was on a storm and then, it's like I should have stayed there and just hung in there and shot it and made a different driving decision or whatever. And it can be, and that's the tough part. You have to you can't just quit in the middle of one most of the time without losing a whole bunch of stuff you just did, but basically almost like a bunch of work I just did. So, oh man,
it's the bane of time lapse, right? Is like, well, here's the composition I like. And then, at least I'm going to,
for a minute or two,
sunsets or whatever.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, it's over. And now it's like, you have to make that decision. Are we actually going to abandon this? Because you never know, those good clouds might still end up over there.
Yeah. Well, like you said, predicting the future. That's really it. When I'm setting on my camera, these things, I'm predicting where I think it's going to go in my head. And so sometimes I sit there for like a minute or two, like aim left. I'm like, I don't know. I think it might be, and trying to figure out, and then I have to let it go. And on that storm specifically, I know I started out, the mammatus was like covering almost a top half of the frame. And then partway through, I'm like, I'm not aimed good. But I'm like, if I stop it now, I've wasted all that mammatus, because it started, as the storm got closer, it started disappearing upwards, into off the frame. And I'm like, I will have lost all that because I won't do anything with that clip because it's not even a full clip.
Right.
And so I had to just sit there and go, okay, I'm just going to do it, And so that's kind of, anyway, that storm still frustrates me. That's all right. It doesn't look bad. In the film, it doesn't look bad. It looks all right.
It never is as bad as you think that it is. No. That's one thing I have found out. It's funny because it's like, the frustration that you have with yourself, like I love it, dude. It's like really like it's because I get it. It's meaningful.
Yeah.
And I find that I do the same shit. Like I get so, miserable and frustrated about stuff that I feel like I could have probably done this better and potentially may have blown the whole shot. And but then what seems to happen more often than not is, like I'll change my composition a little bit, in Lightroom or LR time lapse. Like I'll crop in a little bit or something.
Yeah, of course.
You know what? I still have plenty of, it's a high megapixel. Like I'm still good. And then people see it and like, they don't even know what the hell the difference is either half the time. Like I don't even know that they would have.
It's mostly us. It's mostly us. And then the fact of the matter is that what I've had to learn is that that it's not the end of the world. Like I used to, I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, I remember sitting at a lookout in Arizona with really distant storms, but I had the Milky Way up there and I was kind of time lapsing it, but I'm like, how the storms are far away. I want to get closer, but this is cool because I want a Milky Way time lapse for my film this year with storms. I should sit here. Yeah. So I didn't do it. I drove closer and then the storms and I didn't have anywhere to pull over till the storms were really close. And they kind of came over me. And I'm like, and then I decided screw it. I'm going home. I'm not going back north again. But as I'm looking, I see where the storms are crossing and where I had been would have been magical. I would have had the time lapse. I would have had these clouds moving and I would have had lightning flashing as it got closer coming across this valley. And I still think of 5 years later, I'm still like, bummed about that shot. At the time, I'm like, I just blew like this whole film. I'm not gonna, and then later you put the film together and years go by and you're like, that didn't even matter. Like, no, first off, no one knows I didn't shoot it. I'm the only one who knows I didn't shoot it. And so anyway, you start realizing, just like this Arnold storm where I didn't line it up correctly. I'm like, you know what? I did a lot of I was 90% accurate on my other shots this year. So this one, it won't be accurate, but it still looks nice. And, sometimes you got to learn, like, it's not the end of the world. Like I've got other stuff. I don't have to worry about it being, that this one shot isn't good. But at the same time, knowing who we are and competitive and artists, like it's always the negative thing that kind of sits with you anyway. The negative comment on YouTube, something negative, that you see in something is all you're going to see,
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah. And it's worse when like someone will say something and it validates what your concern actually was, so you'll think and you're like, well, maybe no one will know. And then like somebody will call you out for it and you're like, oh, he's right.
Yeah. Luckily I feel like I don't get a lot of, I haven't seen too many negative ones about things that I'm super worried about, but it's always stuff that is more annoying. Like, oh, the music sucks. And why don't you just have nature sounds and stuff like that? But they used to sit with me longer, but they don't. I just laugh about it now. I just screenshot them and post them on Twitter to mock people.
Right.
Just the weird, crazy ones. The ones that are like, this dude's high or something with their comment. It's funny.
Right. Right. Yeah, dude. YouTube and I don't know. I suppose social media in general these days is it's a rough place to be.
Yeah, you never know who's on social media, so it's a little bit wild.
Yeah. Dude, would you say that the like central US is like the mecca for storms, do you think? Or are there places that you like would love to go to or something to shoot?
I mean, it's definitely probably the mecca of storm photography across the planet. I mean, there's definitely other places. There's people in Italy and Germany and my friend Marco's in Slovenia. He drives, I don't know. I can't think of where the Trieste Sea is, but there's this ocean, there's this like lake or a sea out there where he's gotten spectacular lightning striking down in the water, and they get some supercells out there. There's Catatumbo in Venezuela where there's lightning like every night, 260 nights of the year, just builds up over the lake. And it's someplace I've wanted to go, but now Venezuela and America kind of hate each other and you can't really even go there. And so I don't know when that's going to ever happen. But I almost went, but that's a, another tough thing of, I travel and chase storms all the time. And then that would be something in the fall and I shoot weddings. And I also don't want to be away from my family again to be like gone a week in Venezuela. So it's another thing I haven't not sure if I'll ever do it, but someday. But I mean, that would be a cool place to go shoot storms, but nothing is like the central US because you have like almost the set season, from like early April, mid-April to the end of June, where these kind of just happen on a regular basis. The last couple of years have been a little odd, where they haven't been as good. I mean, this year, I chased for like a week straight, and then it was like 8 days of it being subpar, like not worth chasing. Like I came home for a week at the end of May, which is unbelievable. I mean, the end of May is like the heart of the season. Like the last week of May, first week of June is like the heart of the season. And so I was home almost during that time for like 8 days. There were still storms going on, but I didn't see anything that I was bummed about missing. Like maybe my bar is set really high where I'm like, other people would be like, oh, because if I was out there with like a tour group or something, like we would go chase that stuff and we would probably get lightning and some cool stuff. And a lot of people that go on, these tours, they are just happy just being out there. And if they see a beautiful sunset and they see some lightning, like their day's made. So when you get on something really good, it's like, life-changing for them. For me now at this point, like, unless I get on something really, really good, sometimes I'm not, I'm like, so by knowing what kind of year I was having and the good stuff I was seeing when I was home for a long break, it was, I was like, I'm not missing anything. All the photos I see from people, I'm like, I'm not, I'll cry if I miss something good. And I don't know if it was, was it last year? Yeah. Last year there was one day, June 8th, I came home between tours, had 3 or 4 days at home. I want to see my son's soccer game. And the night before on a Friday, I looked at the models and I told my buddy Brett, I'm like, I should probably be driving to Colorado right now, but I really want to watch Eli play, and so I shut off all social media the next day, Twitter and everything shut down. So I'd be with my family knowing I was going to get in the car on Sunday morning and start driving to Colorado for my next tour group. And on my drive out on Sunday, I turned my phone and everything back on and looked, and everything that I missed the day before was like the best day of the year, like everything. I mean, unbelievable structure, unbelievable lightning, like in front of a mothership, like just striking out in front. Some guy with like a dusty tornado with lightning bolts striking like right down the middle or something. And then at night, like a monster structured beast at night with just with cloud to ground strikes like all over the place. And I'm like, are you kidding me? The one day that I miss is like the best day of the year. So, and that one's sad. And my buddy Brett and I, we use it to compare everything when we talk about forecasts. And I'm like, I'm not chasing like this stuff this week. And I'm like, what do you think? I go, I don't think tomorrow's gonna be good. He's like, yeah, I don't think we're missing Goodland tomorrow. Like, and that's our little thing. We need that those storms were by Goodland. So we say everything now is like, we're not missing Goodland. So we're okay.
Right.
And so that's the tough part about it is that kind of stuff. But anyway, I went on a tangent, but for the central US, the plains, that's why people come from all over the world. Not this year, unfortunately, but for the most part, when I'm out there, I've made friends with, Marco in Slovenia, Brad from Australia, Willoughby from New Zealand, just people from Marco and these guys from Germany. I mean, like they come from my friend Sarah lives in Kuwait. She's been out like 3 times. She did my monsoon workshop a couple of times. She's been chasing tornadoes. So people come from all over because this is where it's at. And it's where you can be out there for like a month and be pretty much guaranteed to see something during that time. Whereas other places, it's harder. It's just not this, we have this insane setup with the Gulf of Mexico and the moisture and the Rockies and the dry air and the sheer, like, it's like a perfect storm basically of where these can happen. So.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. It's cool that what you do kind of lines up with the perfect place to be as well.
Yeah, lucky. Well, and then I come home to Arizona and we have the monsoon, and it's kind of, or at least for a while, it was very underrated chasing kind of stuff. Like people that lived here knew about it, and the photography is beautiful because of our landscape and the lightning, the mountains, and our storms out here are very high based. Like the base of the clouds are much higher than like when you're chasing supercells. So when you see lightning, you're seeing so much more lightning. So it's just so much more of a photogenic kind of lightning out here. I mean, it depends. You can get good stuff out there, of course. But with our landscapes and mountains and deserts and the storms we get, it's stunning. And so now not only do I, get to chase that stuff out there, but then when I come home for like this, come home, then all summer I have beautiful storms to chase here. So it's almost like 6 months of chasing for me, which can be very draining, but I feel really, really lucky.
I would imagine that it's got to be really nice when you can get a lot of good footage that's not far from home, because you kind of still feel like, hey, I didn't even have to go that far, and I could still see my kids or whatever.
Yeah, it's a treat. I mean, like when I'm gone, I mean, the last time I was out there, what I do is the last couple of years is my Forerunner's getting up there in miles. So when I want to come home, I drive it to Denver and leave it in a storage unit and fly home, fly back. And then that way I'm not putting all these miles, and I'm also not driving 12, plus hours back and forth all the time. I can do that, or I have, but it's starting to get harder and harder to do those long drives out. So the last time I went out, I knew I needed to drive my truck home at some point at the end of the season. So I flew out to Denver, got my truck, and the whole time I was just kind of tired, and I was like, I just kind of want to go. I think I'm just going to turn around and go home. And of course I stayed out for like 4 days and chased and got really epic stuff, which is the whole reason I'm doing this film, because the last 4 days were really, really good. But I kind of just I'm tired of, staying in a hotel. I'm tired of just driving. And it felt lonely this year as well. I had Brett with me, my buddy, and doing the tours and stuff, but none of my good friend Daniel Shaw comes from Australia. He's here usually for 3 months chasing. And a lot of these people on the road at night, when you're done chasing, you go have Applebee's, you go get dinner, and you might stay at the same hotel. And so there's a really cool friendship and camaraderie out there. And this year, most people are just trying to, at least for me, I was trying to keep to myself, just trying to avoid, a couple of friends, my friend Mike, if you know Mike Meswell, he's a really good friend of mine. Follow him on Instagram. But we would meet up a couple of times, talk about what we were chasing and all that, and so that was nice. But it just kind of like the end of the summer, or the spring, I was just kind of done. So coming home, it's a long drive home. I was exhausted, and then so being able to chase the other day where I got that microburst was like magical. It's like I went out to Tucson. It's not even a far drive, like an hour and 45 minutes. Some people that might be really far, but for me, driving like an hour and 45 minutes is like freaking driving a Circle K for a thirst buster or something. And so getting this microburst and then just grabbing like dinner and then driving home in like 45 minutes was like this is, I can't wait. I'm so excited that this is summer now that I can just chase storms and come home and sleep in my own bed. And in the summer, I usually take my kids with me, and with school, like maybe not starting until later in August, I'm going to be able to take them out a lot, hopefully. And so that's kind of nice too.
Do they have appreciation for this kind of thing? Are they like, this is what daddy does, are they into that? I mean,
they don't like love it like I do, of course, but and when we go out a lot now, it's a lot of it is just fun for them. They get to be on their iPads, which they are all the time right now anyway, but they, they're on their iPads, they're playing games. We go get, kind of junk food at gas stations, and when we stopped places, I had walkie-talkies one year, and they went for like they went and explored down like a dirt road and were talking to me on walkie-talkies. And so it's a little bit of like an adventure, but they will, my little boy, when he was like 4, he was like pointing out lightning out. He's like, Daddy, there's lightning. I just saw one, like trying to help me out. And my daughter, for a little bit, she got radar scope on her laptop or on her iPad when we're driving. She's like, Daddy, I see lightning. We need to go get that. Or Asher started doing that too, my youngest. And so I think they will get into it a little bit because of me, but none of them are like, Daddy, I love the weather. Like I'm drawing pictures of lightning. They're not like that kind of like obsessed about it, but it's fun though, because I get to take them with me when I'm doing this. And sometimes for me, a lot of times it's a job, it's work. When I'm out there time lapsing, I'm really focused on what I'm doing. So, if I'm in the middle of doing that and the kids are like, Daddy, come look at this. I'm like, I can't, guys, I'm working.
Yeah.
And I have had plenty of times, it's like, I feel like a really horrible dad. I'm like, guys, stop. I can't.
Right.
Like, and then I'm always like, hey guys, I'm very sorry. I was really focused on working, and I have a really hard time doing 2 things at once, where I'm like trying to listen to you and also trying to focus on this. This is when Daddy's working, but I love you guys. I'm not mad at you at all. It's hard to pull away, this is what I do. This is Daddy's job right now. I'm focused on this. And so, and they all understand, I think at this point, they all know like Daddy's fine. He's hyped up over what he's doing. Stuff. So. But I like having them there, because at least out here, it's usually more relaxing. It's fun to share that with them. I hope when they grow up, they'll remember like some of these times that, we had to go chasing with Dad. Dad got basically take us to work. They're getting older now though. And like, especially during this pandemic, I mean, little guy's gotten pretty addicted to Fortnite, and my middle one loves soccer so much. So being cooped up in a car for hours and being in the desert where he probably can't kick a soccer ball anywhere, he'll probably be like kind of bored. As they kind of get different interests. When they're younger, it's not so bad, but we'll see when I take them out this year what it's like. They're also growing up, and all I have is a 4Runner, and my back seat stays the same size, and they just keep getting bigger. Right. So I don't know how they're all going to fit back there. But
how old are they now?
11 and 8 and 6. The 6-year-old's almost 7, and my 11-year-old will be 12 in November. So they're getting older. My 11-year-old, my daughter, Elila, she has been chasing with me since she was like a year and a half. And that's when I kind of started all this. And that's kind of how I got my wife to let me be out all the time early on. Was like, I'll just take Lila for a drive and she'll watch the movie in the back seat while I go chase lightning, and you can have a nice night to yourself. And so it was like, a nice little trade-off, but it was fun. Right. I got to take her all over, and I have like pictures of me and her like way up north, chasing, and I don't know. I have told her stuff like, oh, you don't remember doing this where you like had to go to the bathroom on the side of the road? And she's like, I don't remember that at all. I'm like, yeah, you already don't. I'm like, so I have all these memories of times we've had together that she's already even forgotten, but it's been fun to kind of have them along, and it's I don't know, it's really cool.
When do they start like actually like remembering stuff long term is what I wonder, because my daughter's 2, and it's like I'll always say to myself, I'm like, she's never gonna remember any of this stuff, and it's so weird.
You have to, I feel like it has to be like a not traumatic, but it has to be very intense memory,
right, that
they'll remember, because I barely remember anything. The one thing that I think that will help more, at least in our family, is that I'm a photographer, obviously, and I do weddings and family photos and all that stuff. And I haven't as much lately, but I took a ton of pictures of the kids, like the big days, like Easter, they get dressed up first day of school, like Halloween, we do a photo shoot. Every now and then when I'm motivated, I'll grab my camera when they're doing something like outside, and I'll take pictures of them. So we have tons of pictures of them growing up, being out chasing a storm, like them on top of my car, like dancing on top of my car. I have a picture of Eli in my car with a monster dust storm behind him. Like, it was an unbelievable picture. So I have a lot of these photos that, and on our Apple TV, when it goes to, like screensaver, it pulls all of like my photos off my computer and does like a grid, like slideshow kind of thing. So all the time we're seeing pictures. We're like, oh, there's Charlie, our dog that died 3 years ago. Like, there's, look at Eli, he's goofy. Like, so we constantly see that stuff. So I'm hoping in some roundabout way, though, maybe some of these memories will be a little more ingrained in them because of the pictures that they'll see a lot.
The memory of the memory.
Yeah, the memory of the memory. And also, like, if you see something, like, it doesn't fade if you keep kind of being reminded of it,
Yeah, totally. It must feel really amazing when you're out, like if you're out for like 2 straight months just to get back home though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've never gone really for the most I've been gone, I think has been about 12 straight days. But it's, it feels like sometimes it's really long because you come back and you're only home for a few days and you go back out. And I do the tours. This year was different because people couldn't make it. And so they were a little more like custom, some guy drove out from California, met us in Denver. We chased for like 6 days. And then he was like, man, I'm good, and it was kind of getting dead after that. So he drove back and it was fine. But other ones are like, they fly from Australia, Canada, meet us in Denver, and we have a 10-day tour. And we have to, either chase every day or, it's a down day, we stay in a hotel or whatever. But I don't go home. It's not like when it's like dead for 3 days that I go home and see the family. I'm just out there.
Right. And that's a workshop, right? That you're doing when you say
it's tours. Like a workshop. They call them, I call it more of a tour because that's what everyone else calls them out there. But I don't do really any teaching because it's too much for me. Mike Meswell, he'll do it. And I don't know how he does it. He has some people with him. And the other day we were hanging out in the field waiting for storms to go up. And I kind of walked over to their car and he's like, yeah, we're doing a little editing lesson right now. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like, my brain is fried. It's different out here. I do workshops in Arizona. So I do them down in Tucson twice a year for 5 days. And it's different out here because we're not driving, 10 hours from Montana to Texas for like the storm shit. We go to the same house every night. We rent a house. We stay in Tucson. We go chase, and we come back at night at some point, sleep, get up, do workshop in the morning, because usually there's no storms till the afternoon. So you get to workshop all morning, learn stuff, and then we have lunch, and then we go out and chase the afternoon into the evening, and then come home and do it again. But chasing tornadoes and stuff is exhausting. I mean, you're driving far, you're trying to get your own stuff. When you get back to the hotel, at least for me, when I'm time lapsing on a good day, I might have 5 CF cards that are like 128 gigs to dump. And then my Sony, another like little 120 gig card to dump. And it'll take me 2.5 hours to dump everything. And so for me, you've heard all the horror stories about people losing stuff because they leave it in their car or they wrote over a memory card or something. And so for me, when I get back to the hotel, I dump all my cards onto one hard drive. And then when I go to sleep, I start copying it to another hard drive. And then, I put one hard drive in one bag and one in the other. Mm-hmm. And then, at least I'm doing the best I possibly can that someone stole my camera bag. Hopefully they don't take this. And if one hard drives fail, then hopefully the other one survives. And then I try to rotate the memory card sometimes. So I'm not going into the one I just shot yesterday until like 2 days from now kind of thing. Just if, depending on how things work out. Yeah. So anyway, it's just kind of like you get to the hotel and then you're up for another couple hours doing that. You're mentally exhausted from the day. And when you're out there chasing supercells, you are thinking about your cameras, you're looking at radar, you're looking at road networks, and you tend to have more intense storms with larger hail, potential for tornadoes. And so anyway, long story short is that teaching like workshops while you're doing all that out there and exhausted I just don't do it. So
it's a lot.
It's a lot. And for the most part, we call them tours because people just come along. They're usually photographers. They're usually already like my friend Sarah from Kuwait. She's a Sony ambassador. So she already knows how to do it. She's mostly just along to be taken to the storms because she doesn't live here and she doesn't know how to do it herself really well. These guys, some of these guys that have come from Australia and Canada, they've come a few times and now they chase on their own, saves them money and they want to just do the experience themselves and they're good at it. And some other people, they still want to just follow along and come along and get pictures and enjoy just being with people. So they don't need to necessarily learn. Not to say I don't pass on stuff when I'm out there and be like, oh yeah, if you have a lightning trigger, here's this. And I totally did that with this girl, Tracy from Canada a couple of years ago. She had her doing really short exposures and her ISO for lightning set at like over 1,000. And I'm like, what are you doing? And like, I figured, she's chased storms before, you knew how to do this. And she was a little confused on how, maybe to shoot lightning at this time. So I helped her get everything set up so she would get good pictures. I'm like, I want you to get good pictures while you're here. I'm not going to just leave you there. So I definitely will do that kind of thing for sure to try to help people get that stuff, but it's just not an official teaching kind of workshop.
Other than the kind of the obviousness of the use case of a lightning trigger, is there anything like about it that would be better, say, than just shooting like longer exposures and knowing that you're just going to get something and time lapsing, 5-second exposures or something?
I mean, you want a lightning trigger during the day or dusk is about the only time that I ever use it. I mean, sometimes I leave it on when it's getting dark because I'm doing too many things. I don't have time to take it off because I'm watching the other cameras. But it's very helpful during the day when you can only get your camera like maybe like 1/40th of a second without, putting like ND filters on them and stuff. My lenses, wide angle lenses don't really take the filters too well.
The stupid bulbous.
Yeah, like the Sigma 14 one, the Canon 1124. There's just the filters are ridiculous. They're expensive, and to take them on and off is just, And then storms are different than shooting like other scenes where it gets darker and you don't really necessarily need them on there. So then what do you got to do? You got to take it off. Like it's just not worth it. So, but you can go to like f16 to f18 and try to get your shutter speed, down to like 1/60th or something or slower with a lightning trigger. And it's really, really helpful. I mean, I get tons of lightning with that thing during the day, but once you can get your camera to, 1 or 2, 3 second, Diet Coke. Thanks, babe. Yes, I needed a Diet Coke. We've got a real bad habit during the, it's not bad. I mean, Diet Coke is probably the worst thing that I do, but it's, but we've become like during the pandemic, we've just done McDonald's runs for Diet Cokes, like just ran. My neighbor, he works at home. He'll go out and get Cokes and he'll bring me one or I'll bring him one. And Gina just went out and got some. So
it's like a weird zombie
Coke
movie.
Is the best. It is. Yeah. It's like, that's what we figured out. So, but yeah, once you can do longer exposures, it's way better to just do a constant, 3+ second exposure to get lightning. Like and even I get a lot of lightning just doing time lapse where I'm doing a shot every second of a storm, and I get tons of lightning that way. So, but they're very valuable, I think, during the day.
Yeah. Well, no, that makes sense, especially because you're right. You can't really, the obvious thing I was thinking was ND filters, but you're right. Maybe you just don't want to deal with
ND filters. A lot of people wouldn't understand. I did a lightning tutorial somewhere. It's either on YouTube or it's on my Patreon page. I don't know, but there's, too much ND filter is gonna ruin your lightning as well, because unless it's really close. I mean, if you think about ND filters, they're slowing down like the light coming through, basically, like in a way, like a 10 stop. People are like, I've heard people say, why don't you just slap a 10 stop on there during the day and do long exposures? And I'm like, I don't think you understand how light works. Like for a 10 stop to work, light has to be constant to get pushed through it. A lightning bolt is that. So how is that going to penetrate a 10 stop filter, even if you're doing a 45-second exposure? Like it has to be able to penetrate. Right. So if you have too dark of an ND filter on there, it might make your lightning look kind of dim and not be able to come through in the blink of an eye, because it's got to almost be a little more constant. That's the whole point, I think, of an ND filter. So there's a little bit of a balance where if you use one, it needs to be, a small, like 3-stop or something, like not a very big ND filter.
Yeah. Just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe you get it down slow enough and then also you might crank your ISO up to be a little more sensitive to it, as long as you can get your shutter. I mean, you definitely, when you use a lightning trigger, the slower shutter speed is going to be better for you. So that's why some people use them. And I've used them on like a 50 millimeter or 135, use the ND filter to get lightning at work, but you just can't go, oh man, I'll slap a 10 stop on here. It'll be great. Like it doesn't necessarily work that way. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear. I'm not so sure that I would have even thought about that.
I think that's accurate. If I am wrong, like if some like awesome photography scientist will say, Mike, you're freaking full of crap. Like that's not how it works. That's fine. But in my experience, I've had ND filters on there and the lightning doesn't look as good. So
right.
I actually proved it on my video, because I was at the Grand Canyon and it's frustrating. I left the ND filter on there and was doing like 10 to 12 second exposures with the lightning trigger. And my buddy John was next to me with a lightning trigger and didn't have ND filter on. And I realized that, like, why the hell is my exposure almost at 15 seconds right now? I'm doing 1 second exposures on my other camera. And I realized, I'm like, I forgot to take my ND filter off.
Right.
We both got the same bolt, and mine is lacking filaments that his has. And the only thing I can say is that the ND filter, they're there, but they're dim. And so the only thing in my brain is that ND filter blocked that extra light coming in for those filaments that he got, because he just shot it like normal. So that proved it in my eyes, but
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that the ND filter would essentially get rid of like the constant ambient light rather than just like the transient kind of thing. That makes sense. I was also asking because I was curious, like, do you think, I would think that the advantage of the lightning trigger as well would be the fact that you're able to shoot at a shorter exposure, because I would think that at a certain point of a longer shutter speed, the clouds are going to start looking a little bit muddy or something. Like, and I would assume that maybe that sharpness would be better at like a quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're daytime, like if you were daytime shooting it and you were doing like a 5 second exposure, then you're definitely going to see cloud moving. So at night it's better, because unless you have like an insane barrage of lightning, 30 second exposure, you get one good lightning bolt. The chance of another one in that 30 seconds is kind of low. So you're going to have frozen clouds with the light. But if you do have a really active storm and you do like a 30 second exposure and you have your bolt hit early on, freezes the clouds, and then by the end of your exposure, you get another one hit. Well, the clouds have moved and suddenly you have weird ghosting happen where you almost see like a ghost of the clouds that have moved or something. And it's not great. You have to like almost do well, you can't really do a blend. You almost take another image before that and try to composite two together where the clouds look normal, because otherwise you kind of ruined it or something. So yeah, if you were doing a long exposure kind of during the day of like 5 seconds, you would definitely start getting soft looking clouds that are moving, kind of like what a 10 stop would do for anything.
Right. Yeah. You're using it for that kind of minimalist, fine
if you
art
want to do
type
that, you do a great, long exposure. If you could get lightning and then have it smooth, like, and make a nice black and white, like I can see that. I still just don't know that you're able to get a good clear lightning bolt along with that. But you can try to find that balance. It's there. I mean, there's a certain part or time where the ND filter is going to fight against you,
right?
Unless you have a bolt hitting freaking quarter mile away right in front of you, blinding you, then it's probably going to penetrate any ND filter. But
sure.
But not everyone wants to shoot lightning when it's that close, like I do.
Right. Speaking of which, have you ever? I mean, I'm sure the answer's got to be yes, right? Have you ever been in situations where you're like, this is actually like fucked up, I shouldn't be here right now? Like, have you had any close calls?
I haven't had any like super duper close calls. I mean, I've almost been, had lightning hit, within 40 to 60 feet of the car many times. Even just this last season, we're out in the middle of, or out in Kansas on a storm that's dying. It was a huge bust day, but a storm went up, barely had dropped any lightning. And we're sitting there on a flat farm or flat dirt road with farms around us with nothing. And we're getting ready to pack up, and all of a sudden it sounded like a bolt hit the top of the truck or something. Like it was just out of nowhere, and like someone dropped their tripod. I thought someone probably got struck.
Wow.
But I think it hit like 100 feet behind us. Like it was right there. And it was we had no reason to be like nervous, because it wasn't like it was throwing out lightning hardly at all. So, so sometimes you don't think you're in danger, and all of a sudden, man, I could have been killed right now.
Right.
But lightning is, even when you're out there, it's pretty rare that you're going to get struck. And you sit in your car and stuff. But I think in my brain, for the most part, I've been more like frightened of things because I'm very cautious. I want to get home. I don't want to get stuck anywhere. I don't want to be in the path of a oncoming like storm that could drop a tornado on me. Like I'm probably overly like cautious and sometimes a little overly worried about stuff compared to, some other chasers that just follow right. They'll be right underneath a wall cloud. And I'm like, how do you know the tornado is not going to drop on top of you instead of 100 feet away? But they'll be there and they'll watch where it starts spinning up on the ground, and then they're right there. And it's just a little bit too close for me. Although I think if I ever got in that situation like people were on yesterday, where they were right behind a tornado, I'd probably freaking love it. So,
yeah.
But I don't, I'm trying to think I can't remember. I mean, early on, I was in Nebraska, like when I didn't know what I was doing, and I had like, watching like a storm come at me, and it was tornado warned. I'm like, oh, I'm fine because it's headed towards the town north of me, and I can just drop south and let it go by. So I'm fine. But as I'm sitting there watching it come, I'm not paying attention to another storm had built up just south of that one. And it was coming at me, and it was tornado warned. And by the time I realized it, I knew I couldn't drop south because I would go through it. So I would have to go north where the other storm was headed for that town that was tornado warned as well. So I had to so I started panicking. I raced to that town, then I had to get gas. And as that storm's coming, I had to blast east. And it was dark, and I was probably doing over 100 because I was just kind of terrified. I had 2 tornado warned storms coming at me in the dark. And I was inexperienced, and I was like, I got to get out of the path of these storms. Just get me out of here. You know? And I kind of raced east and went south and and kind of just got right in front of one of the storms coming by and let it go by. And then, I'm sure I was fine. I don't think there was a single tornado on anything. And, but it's kind of one of those moments where you get a little bit in your head about it and all that stuff. I mostly, if I get scared of anything, it's probably more so at night or with big line of storms coming. Sometimes, when you are chasing supercells and you want a good tornado, it's usually on like an isolated supercell that you can kind of watch from different angles. And that's, if tornado drops, where it's going. But what happens is usually by the end of the night, all these storms have gone up and they form like one big line, which is generally called like an MCS, like a big line of storms. Now what can happen is, even though it's just a big line of storms where they're not supercells anymore, you can have little parts that wrap up on the leading edge that can be these QLCS tornadoes that are kind of hard to predict because they can almost happen anywhere. It's where you might see a little kink or a buckle in the line where things kind of wrap around. And so a couple of years ago, I was just like, oh, I'm going back to Norman, Oklahoma to go sleep for the night. But I had a line coming behind me. And then all of a sudden, one north side went tornado warned and the south side went tornado warned. And they kind of crisscrossed right where I was. And I'm like, I just want to get away from the storm right now. Like just, and I tried to get, I tried to get into like a McDonald's just to ride it out, and they wouldn't let anyone in. Then I went to a gas station, and I'm like, I just want to like pull in here and like sit and wait for the storm to go over and then go to a hotel. So I didn't see a parking garage or anywhere to pull out. And they're not usually as like, those kind of tornadoes aren't like super dangerous. They can destroy some stuff, but they're not like big, like a tornado. Yeah. They're not like that. They're more like quick spin ups and stuff. And I'm sure they can be,
like a 1 or a 2 or something like that.
Yeah, something like, or less. Yeah, it can be, but I mean, sure they can be that bad, but I think for the most part, they're kind of brief spin ups. And so I wasn't really worried about it happening. It was more of like, I just don't want to be out here in my car in the middle of nowhere with one of these coming around. So I just was like, I'm going to go like seek shelter.
Yeah.
Just to be safe. And I don't, at night, that's more like when you can't see anything. That's when things get a little more like spooky for me just in general. And I'm kind of spooked like that. Anyway, like these guys, like, I don't know if you do this because you said Milky Way and stuff, but some of these guys that will just, I even know a girl here named Linda that she'll just drive out to the desert in the middle of the night and go shoot Milky Way all night by herself. And I'm like, man, I get too freaked out there, like in the middle of nowhere by myself. I mean, it's, I'm not as great doing that stuff as other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it depends. Like, what you know, what I have noticed is that the first like maybe hour or so that I'll show up to a location, even if I'm by myself and it's dark, is I'll have some of that anxiety, and I'll have some of that, like, you're just kind of extra looking around and almost like making a little noise. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm gonna set up my tripod. You know, like
I live in the desert, so I'll stomp around too. Like, so if there's any critters or snakes or something around that, I scare them off. But like,
you got scorpions out there too.
Yeah.
But you know what I've noticed is that once I'll start shooting, and then I kind of start to relax and I get my bearings, and then your eyes start to adjust. Yeah. Like even in the starlight, you can like see like shockingly well. It will almost feel like, I don't know, like almost a little like, I hate this word, but almost like empowering. Like you're almost sort of like, hey, like I've got this. This is my area and I'm good and I can see everything. And it's, you almost get like the adrenaline kind of starts to kick in. That's what'll happen to me.
That's awesome. I mean, because I've been to the Grand Canyon a few times at night to try to shoot it. And I can't remember if I was there by myself one time, but at the Grand Canyon, if there's storms around and it's windy and it's dark, it's a very spooky place. Because not only do you have like the edge that you're trying to make sure you're not like coming up on in the dark, but you know, there's people will still be driving around, or they could be hiking, or someone could be wandering around in like the dark. And in my brain, like all that is like must be happening all the time. Like if I go walk off here, someone's going to walk up to me going, "What are you doing?" Like at like 10 o'clock at night or something in the dark. And so I've been there a couple of times and almost like petrified to get out of my car to like go shoot potential lightning. Been there with friends before, and I'm like, thank God you guys are here. I feel way more safe having someone else here just with me, knowing you know, if something happens, at least we're both here or whatever. So I don't know what it is about that. I don't know why. In another time I was there, I had my kids with me and my other friend Brian. We're walking out towards the edge, and there's these, all of a sudden towards the edge, there's two little glowing eyes just stare at us. And I'm like, if I was here by myself right now, I probably would freaking turn and run back to the truck. Yeah. I don't know. Like, what would I have done? So I don't know why I hate that part. Like, I wish I was a little more, I don't know why I have that fear about that. So I get a little bit spooked at night. And then we realized it was like some ringtail fox that was just wandering around. They live on the edge of like canyons and stuff. And I'm like, it's nothing. Like, it's just funny how when it gets dark for some reason, I get a little nervous. I've had friends that have been, you know, like people come up to them and try to steal their camera stuff. And I think I've, you know, at night and like dirt roads and stuff. And so I think sometimes it's just like a worry that I'm out here and I don't have any, like, I like to be next to my truck. Like if I could pull up my truck to the edge of the Grand Canyon and just be right outside of it and sit there, no problem. But if I have to hike, you know, like 60, 80 feet in the dark somewhere to set up,
carrying a bunch of stuff,
And that's the part where I'm like, if I want to get to safety, I have to run like 80 to 100 feet to get to my truck. Like it's kind of like there's no security blanket, I think, of having that. And so maybe I've just gotten too used to being right next to my truck when I chase, you know.
Well, I think it's a perfectly rational fear to have. And also I would add, I don't know if it's still the case. I lived in Arizona for a couple of years, like 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And at least at the time, it was like the number one state where like fugitives would run to and live. And it's like, there's something about the Southwest that's it's got a little extra scare factor in the wilderness.
Absolutely. There, especially in Southern area. That's why I'm like, why am I freaked out the Grand Canyon? There's no like fugitives like coming from Mexico running through the Grand Canyon. You know, they're not doing that. But definitely Southern Arizona and stuff, I've been spooked. I even found a really nice overlook over south of Interstate 8 last year, like a nice like 4-mile dirt road, and found a little like almost like a molehill. I don't know what a molehill is. It's a little rounded hill, like a never-ending story. There's like this round hill in the middle of the swamp. If you ever watched that movie.
Oh yeah,
I drive to the top of it. You literally can see 360 degrees in any direction, and you're up like about 100 something feet or so. And I'm like, oh my God, this is magical. But at the same time, it's southwestern Arizona. I know there's like an Air Force field that no one really knows it's there. They do bombing runs, but there's illegals that will sneak across. I don't know that they go through there because that would probably be really stupid.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't think I'd ever come here at night. Like I've been on I-8 before and had a cop check on me. He's like, I just make sure, okay, a lot of drug deals and stuff will happen on this road. And so being on top of a hill at night, I mean, I have a little like pistol that I'll take with me, and sometimes, and I've never even shot it, but it's mostly just to have with me on nights like that if someone tried to rob me, or if I had my kids with me and I just want to make sure that I'm, protected when I'm out in these crazy places in Southern Arizona.
Yeah.
But even then I feel like I wouldn't even do anything with it. I'd probably just hopefully scare a person off and stuff. But that kind of stuff is right. I'm like, I don't think I went on there during the day when I found that spot. I'm like, I don't think I could come here at night. God, unless I had a friend with me following me and we're up here together, like it'd be a tricky place to be.
It's always weird too when you go out, like I'm going to get out into the middle of nowhere, and then you'll find some sign of mankind that's like very vague. That's always the spots where I'm just like, all right, like what is this
or
about?
you just hear one thing. You hear like a crack, or you hear some like footstep or a weird sound, and you're like, what was that? And then you can't get it out of your brain, and you think someone's there spying on you. Of course, no one's there.
Right.
It's just your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to, when we lived in, when I lived in Tempe, and like had a little, crew there alongside, this is like way before I was into photography.
Right.
We used to drive, we would just like pick a road, and I'm sure it's more developed now, because I remember at the time Phoenix was like growing so fast. Yeah. But it was just like, you could pick a road and you could drive 30 minutes and it was like, where the hell are we? It was like, and we used to drive down to, what's that spot? Like Four Peaks. We go to that area.
Yeah.
And it was always cool because there was just endless, like random dirt roads.
Oh yeah.
And you could just pull off and be like, let's just stay here for a minute. And like, you'd always see, a tarantula or something. Yeah. And it was like, this is so wild that this is a thing,
Well, just north of Phoenix last year, we were just on some, shooting a sunset storm, and as we're driving back, we see 2 tarantulas walking across the dirt road in the dark with the lights on, and we got out and looked at them and stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff out here, a lot of cool roads, but I think if you're by yourself or just me and my kids, it's a little bit, it can be spooky on those dirt roads. Cause you just, it's also like a gung-ho, like gun state and stuff. And you don't want to be on like some rant, like, what are you doing here? You just don't know who you're coming across, and making sure you're not, you might not see a trespassing sign anywhere, but you don't know that you actually are. Or I'm in Southern Arizona and I'm like on the shoulder of a road shooting across a farm, and all of a sudden a guy in a truck comes racing up across the farm in the dirt up to me like, what are you shooting? What are you doing? Or like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, dude, I'm not even on your land and you're yelling at me, so you don't even know who you're going to like run into in these places.
Yeah. It is weird too, how people, I don't know what, I've never been a large farm landowner in Arizona, so I don't have that perspective, but you do wonder like the super like defensive, posturing when you hear stories like that, where it's like, dude, what is the, like, I clearly have a camera. Like what do you think I'm up to?
Yeah. No, it happened in, we're in Eastern Wyoming this year. There's a few of us chasers that went down a dirt road. I think there was a sign for land, but it didn't say no trespassing. I don't know if it had a name for like a ranch or something, but it just didn't say no trespassing. Maybe it's like an inherent thing, but we were on the dirt road, pulled off from the edge like we would normally do. On the left side, there was like barbed wire fencing around something. On the right side, it was like a little rolling hill and grass. No fencing, nothing. So like walked like 20, 30 feet to set up my camera. Some other people were behind us, and Mike was down the road too. And this freaking like weird old green like fire truck comes flying down the road, like honking its horn, like, and he gets out and he's like, "What do you guys think you're doing? What are you doing here?" And I'm usually pretty good at being level-headed and kind of smooth talking these situations. Some other people my buddy Brett gets a little hot-headed if people are real jerks. And Brett was like, that guy, he's like, I just went and sat in the car. That guy I wasn't going to say anything to him. He looked like he'd kill me. And I went up to him, I go, he goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "We're just shooting the storm." I go, there's no fence here. I thought it was okay. He's like, "Get on the road and stay off the grass," or whatever. And like, I mean, like literally like rolling hills of Wyoming. Like he's yelling at us about being on the hill, and he went zooming off. And also my other friends that were down like 300 feet, he went up to them, and all of a sudden they go walking back to their car with their cameras and stuff. And he just came by and he was just angry. He was just mad. And I don't know. I mean, we didn't see any no trespassing signs. There was no fencing where we were standing and all this stuff. And so thought we were doing our best. And that's what I told him. He couldn't hear anything I was saying. He was
I don't get that.
Yeah.
What's the, I don't say angry for the sake of being angry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing I can see is like if this was all my land and the sign is like, it says, if it was like my ranch and people were driving into my property and walking around, maybe I'd be like, who do these people think they are? Like, this is my land. But most people have no trespassing signs or make it obvious that this is private property, and that one didn't have it. And so usually, I mean, we try to abide by it. We definitely, like, I do my best to abide by those things, unless it's like a storm of a lifetime that I have to shoot this very second and I need to pull into some guy's, right past his fence for a reason or something. But that, yeah, so it's just kind of weird. I think I can understand, like, if you were on their property that they might be upset, but the reaction of just coming up and yelling and saying, "Hey guys, this is kind of like private property. Could you stay close to your car? Like, I appreciate you're out here shooting the storm," or something. Yeah. But we've had very nice people and very unreasonable people. That said that, some guy a couple of years ago said he's calling the cops on us for blocking a dirt road, which we weren't blocking it. He just had to kind of maneuver around us. And I'm like, "I'm very sorry. We'll move our cars to, we're all on the one side." Like, I was being and he just wouldn't stop. Brett was there too. Brett, that's the one when Brett lost it. He was just like, yeah, the guy was being a jerk. I mean, he was like, "You city folk, just come out here. You go back to the city." And I mean, he was just like a stereotypical kind of stuff. He was yelling at us, and Brett just lost his mind.
Yeah. Well, you see like some of these things on, I think there was one, and I don't even remember exactly what the story was, but F-stoppers will report on a lot of this stuff of like, there'll just be some guy on a dirt road shooting. And
I remember that story. It was from like a year or two ago.
Yeah. What was the deal? It was something
I can't
similar.
remember, but I think it was a storm chaser or something. He just really was, I can't remember, but the guy was on like a county road. The person had no business yelling at him about where he was or what he was doing because he was on a county road.
Yeah, but I think he like broke his camera or like it got to a physical altercation, but I don't remember what happened.
Well, and there's just some people who I think see a camera and see what you're doing and they just take offense to it. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like there's some weird like ingrained like peeping Tom thing.
Yes,
like you have a camera, you're looking at my wife, or it's like no.
Yeah, or you're shooting my property. Like, what do you taking pictures of my house and stuff? I'm like, no, your house is way small in the shot. I'm shooting the storm or something.
Yeah, I don't want your shit house in my composition.
Yeah, I know. I'd rather. Can we get rid of it? I'll probably Photoshop it out. Honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man, that is wild. It's not something that I have to deal with here, although it's a blessing and a curse because there's so many goddamn people out here. But at the same time, they don't tend to get too upset about that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Dude, what about the Arizona summers out there, man? Like have you dealt with it by now? Are you good with it?
No, it's hot. I mean, I've lived here my whole life, so this stuff is normal, but usually this extreme heat happens in June, and like right now, like Saturday's supposed to be 118.
Yeah,
just awful. And but right now we should be having storms and moisture, and it should be more like 103, 105, I think is usually what it would be this time of year. And so that's what kind of sucks for me, at least, is I usually chase supercells all through June when it gets to be really hot here, and I'm able to be out there and chase. And so when I come home, I expect to be chasing storms and not to deal with 118. But I mean, we got a swimming pool now in this house. We lived here for 6 years. First time I've ever owned a pool.
Oh, that's cool.
It's been great for the kids to grow up.
Yeah.
They're all great swimmers now, and we're out there every day. Just, my wife and I pretty much just float there and try to get tans or just relax while the kids play around and play with the kids a little bit too. But it's very relaxing to have. But the problem is the pool water is now warmed up enough that if you swim in the water, it doesn't feel much better than the air. And so
right.
You actually get out and lay on like a raft or lay on the ground, and the water and the breeze cools you down more than actually being in the pool itself. So
what's the water temperature?
I'm sure it's like in the 80s or 90s or something. I mean,
probably 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. I think every time I bought a thermometer, I never feel like it's super accurate, but I need to buy another one. But yeah, it just feels like the last couple of days. And once this weekend goes by and it's 118, it's gonna be really warm.
Yeah.
So when it starts getting down, if it can get down below 90s at night, then it's not so bad. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like this temperature. I also don't like where it's really chilly. I liked where it was like a week ago. Like it was really perfect. It was just a little bit of a chill when you jump in, but not so bad. But now it's just that just sounds so spoiled too. Like, oh, my pool's not the perfect temperature. It's really nice to it's nice to have. We walk out the back door, jump in there and swim. And it's relaxing especially to get off the internet and get off just kind of away from stuff for a little bit.
Dude, 118, you've got full permission to complain. Like, honestly,
yeah. It's just really hot.
Dude, I remember when I was living out there and like people would kind of go into it with that, like, I guess like Midwest or East Coast mentality. They're like, yeah, but it's not humid. And I'm like, bro, it's 115 degrees. Like it's not humid in an oven. You know what I mean? You can still cook a turkey in it. Die.
Yeah. And if people, I really hate when people say dry heat because it definitely doesn't, we don't have a ton of moisture right now. So you don't walk outside when it's 115 and necessarily get drenched right away unless you're working or doing something. Like it's still, it's hot, but it is like almost like a dry oven kind of heat where but it's still like, it's kind of oppressive.
Oh yeah.
Kind of heat. It's different though. I mean, I would much probably rather, if I was honest with myself, I'd much rather walk around at 115 than like 97 with like 80% humidity and sweat. Like I don't like sweating. So that's why I wouldn't want to do that. So I understand. They're like, yeah, well, it's kind of a dry heat. But the problem is when the monsoon is going on, it can be 108 and be kind of humid a little bit because of moisture and we get storms. So I know this is a dry heat. I'm like, not necessarily. During the storm season, it can be hot and we actually can have like 60-degree dew points and it's going to be, 40% humidity, which isn't, 80%, but even 40% with 108 is pretty bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's not always a dry heat.
I can remember, I was a young man. I was like 20 when I lived there. And I remember I think I was living in like an apartment complex near like ASU where it's just like, madness.
Oh yeah.
And I remember like when you would just have one of those absolute downpours, it was almost like the whole apartment complex would like come alive and people would like go out on their deck and be like, fantastic. It was like the greatest thing ever.
Oh, and it changes the smell. Like and it drops the temp from like 105 to like 78 or something. And you walk outside and you're like, oh my, and that's why, I mean, that's part of the reason I think I grew up loving storms is because my dad loved them, but it was also like people here loved storms because it's so hot and it's dry. We don't get a lot of rain. And then when it comes through, it cools things down. There's always a great smell in the air. And so I think that's why people love it. When you're in the desert, we freaking love, I mean, for the most part, people that live here love storms because you need that,
Yeah.
And that's why everyone comes out of their house and freaks out and it's awesome. And kids playing in puddles. And I'm sure they do that everywhere, but here especially. The only people that don't like storms here are people that move from places like Seattle where it rains all the time. And so they just hate the rain.
Yeah.
And my neighbor hates it for some reason. I don't know. Nathan's weird. Hopefully he listens to this.
Yeah, that's funny, man. Especially because you would think like, even if you were from Seattle, it's like, bro, just spend June and July there. I guarantee you'll be happy about rain. Like you would think.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, I know you said you were probably going to be a little bit tight on time today with the 3 kids and everything.
Yeah.
How we doing? Do we need to?
I can go a little longer. I got like 15 minutes or so. I don't have to go anywhere. I thought I had a dentist appointment, but I think I made it for tomorrow now, so I'm good.
Okay.
I do have to watch in case this roof inspector calls me and is come by. I need to pay attention because I got the roof inspection is a big deal today because they're supposed to be putting roof on tomorrow. They're scheduled to come in the morning, and we got a hole cut where they put the plenum for the air conditioner on the roof, and we don't have any rain in sight, but if it did rain in like the next week and the roof wasn't done, unless we have something covering it, it's going to go right in the attic. So I really want the roof to be done and that to get sealed up. And then also the new air conditioner on the roof would be really, really good.
So you're rehabbing a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, we're adding on 400 square feet to the back of the house. So we're adding a family room. It's a pretty small house. It's like 1,530 square feet. It's a 1953 house in kind of north central Phoenix. So it's older, red brick, really, really freaking love living down here. Like it's awesome. But we have 3 kids. We do have 3 bedrooms in my office that I'm sitting in right now. So the 2 boys share a room, and my daughter has her own room, and obviously master. And we have 2 baths, but we don't really want to move. We love it here. We love our cul-de-sac. We have friends on it. So we're adding another family room, another bedroom, and a bathroom, and a closet on that bedroom. And so it's adding like 400 square feet. So it's going to actually be decent size. So we'll have kind of like a second family room now. And then my daughter, she doesn't really want to take the room yet because it's kind of on the opposite side of the house. I think she's a little scared to be away from everybody sleeping at night. But so it'll be a guest room for a little bit, which is also great because every now and then we might have people come, and it's nice to actually have a guest room.
Yeah.
It'll just be nice to have a little more space for people to spread out, especially if their friends come over. They're getting older, they have friends, and another bathroom. So because we're adding that, we have to add a whole second air conditioning unit to, cool down that side, which I'm excited about because my office is at the very end of the line of the current one, and it's always warm. I've got this Mac. I've got another Mac that my assistant will work on and the kids will be on. I've got probably like 3 RAID drives here. I got like 4 or 5.
Those things heat up.
Yeah. I have all this heat in here. And also it's at the end of the line anyway, so it doesn't cool off that great. So they hooked this up to the new one, which is only going to be like 10 feet away. So hopefully this room just gets blasted with cold air. I'm praying,
dude.
So I want it, but right now they cut it to the new one, and so at the current they don't have the new air conditioning up there right now. So I'm in a room that's not getting any cold air blowing into it. Oh man, so the fan at the door blowing cold air in, and it's actually not too bad right now. Feels good.
Well, the back to the compression on Zoom. The compression is significant enough to where it doesn't look like your face is glistening.
Yeah, not sweating. No, actually, I have this fan blowing right on my face and a ceiling fan. It actually feels almost chilly in here right now for some reason. But in the afternoon, it'll get steamy.
Yeah,
it'll be 85 or something in here for sure.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, speaking of the RAID configuration, that's kind of my next thing that I really want to do, because I know that my current, just having it on one external hard drive and then maybe another external hard drive, it's anxiety provoking.
Yes.
And so we're probably going to be getting we're going to be buying a house like pretty soon. And so nice. I'm like just completely gung ho about having like a space. Like this is not like on the couch with my laptop. Like this is a space.
Right. Oh, it's very nice, man. You'll enjoy it. That's what this is. Dude. I've actually have a space. I've got all kinds of crap on. There's a little Voltron Lego that I built right there. I've got like just comic book stuff all over, and it's fine. It's nice to have a space that you can kind of put all your stuff in and control it a little bit.
Totally. Like the lighting will be the same. I don't have to worry about like, I don't know how much that factors into when you edit, but it just seems like I don't have a very good handle on like printing yet. I mean, I think I'm sure clients of mine would probably say, dude, your stuff looks great. Matter. What are you talking about? Yeah. But it's like so frequently when I push something out to even like Instagram or a print, and I'm like, it's so dark or it's so bright. And I know that that's an amalgamation of a lot of different things, but I also feel like just editing in a super bright room a lot of the time is not helping me.
No, it's, I think you definitely have to like figure out where the right spot is. And I will totally admit the same thing. Like I get confused. I think sometimes like I do so much time lapse stuff and I don't care. I don't put as much care and like attention into the printing side. Sometimes I think there's people that probably care too much. Like that there's a certain line where you're like you said, I mean, I have photos printed in my office and I have like a big canvas hanging in a restaurant down here that, it's kind of like somewhat of like my gallery where I can put photos up. They look great. Like I didn't do anything special, edited it, looks good, printed it. It looks fine. But I know like, there's people out there that are so particular and there's so much thing about printing that I don't know that if I did, I guess maybe my stuff would probably look better or they are taking it so far that they don't need to, like there's probably like some kind of healthy balance. Like you're probably going so far that like we talked about earlier, no one else is going to notice this little mistake in my time lapse film or something that I don't like about it. But these guys are probably at the same place where like you can print and hang this anywhere and it's going to look great. You don't have to like kind of go nuts on prepping your file to be perfect.
Right.
But I probably also don't do enough because it's like something that I guess I just don't get into is caring about, that kind of thing. And I have like a workflow I've done for years and it's so hard to like break a workflow that you've been like set doing for 5 years. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely like a law of diminishing returns with like, anything really photography related. But like, I guess where I'm at is that like, so I totally agree. All I know is that often the output does not look the same as it did in Lightroom or in Photoshop.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm just kind of like,
well, you probably have multiple things you're looking at. And my friend Brett and I were dealing with that. He was editing on like a big brick of a Dell laptop. And then he would edit a photo. And then if he posted online, it looks a little green. He's like, it doesn't look green on my laptop. Mm-hmm. But on my phone and my laptop, it did look a little green. And so even I struggled with that this year. I've realized on my Mac that I'm on right now, that's the iMac, and then my phone, all my photos had a certain kind of a tint, but on my laptop, it was a little bluer. It was less warm. Like the monitor was slightly less warm. So if I edited something on my laptop to make it look warm, then if I put it on and then I saw it on my phone or my Mac, it was too warm.
Right.
And so I had to go into like calibration and kind of warm it up enough to match all three of these. And then I'm just like, it's really hard because you like, oh, I want a, perfectly calibrated monitor and all this stuff. But you're like, no one's looking at your photos on your perfectly calibrated monitor. They're looking at on their phone or on their laptop or their iPad. So I want to make sure it looks good on all that stuff that people are looking at. So to me right now, I'm like, it looks great on all three of my Apple devices. And I kind of have it where if I edit here, it's going to look the same everywhere else. And so now I'm like, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And then when I print them, it looks the same on a print that I get delivered. I'm like, it looks like what it did when I edit it, for the most part.
Yeah.
So I feel like I found that balance, but you're right. It's tough. You really want to get your, whatever you're editing on to kind of match maybe, your iPhone or something so that you're like, okay, at least I know when I'm doing, when I edit it here, it's going to look like it does on my phone. And then I can determine someday, I guess, if like freaking phones are accurate. I mean, I would figure like you see the colors on a phone look pretty normal. That's what most people are looking at, these days anyway. So you want it to look good on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do tend to think that it will oversaturate a little bit usually of what you've put on there. Like it'll oversaturate color. Yeah. It'll
a little bit. Yeah.
But then there's that whole debate of like, here's this thing that I made. And I tried to have that discipline to say, I know what's too much, but I know what will still pop. And you try to find that balance. But then it's like on social media, it's almost a different rule because it's like, you see some of the photos where you're like, this is absurd. Like the oranges are clipping so hard in this sunset photo or whatever. But people eat it up, and it's like, and it's always this debate.
It seems like it's the photos that are really overly edited and too dramatic and stuff are the ones that kind of go crazy and people really like. And you look at it and you go, that's an awful, awful edit. It's like no skill. they just use shadows and highlights and clarity and saturation, and it looks like garbage.
Yeah, global edits. No
Yes.
photoshopping. No just this and
no
just
masking.
that.
No, just kind of taking your time to make it look. Yeah, exactly. And it's hard for me to look at that stuff, and then I see it going crazy, and I'm like, that's what they love. I mean, I don't know if you've been paying attention to this guy that just got slammed by all these places that I was involved in, apparently, with that he posted like a storm photo with like an old barn and a sunflowers and a supercell and a tornado coming out of it, and everyone's
I did hear about that. Yeah. It was like the opposite direction or something, right? Was the storm?
It's just I mean, there was multiple things wrong with it, but you could tell that the lighting wasn't right and the direction of everything wasn't right. But the tornado where it was coming out is just almost impossible. Like I've never seen a picture like that. And everybody that's a storm chaser knew that, it's a composite. And other people knew him for a while and seen him, that supercell, and multiple other photos that he's posted. So he's taken this one picture and composited into multiple different things. But the problem is on there, he's commenting to people acting like it's real. And we're all calling him out saying, hey, dude, digital art is awesome. Like, I actually like your photo. It's beautiful. But just tell people what it is. Be proud of your work. Be confident. And just go, yeah, it's digital art. I put these together. But no, for some reason, he has to make people think it's real. Because I don't know if it's going to shatter like his perception. Although I did have someone on Instagram start messaging me last night because he found because Petapixel did an article, and I don't know, I forget who did it, but whoever did is friends with all of us. So he saw my post on Facebook about it, Mike's, Brett's, and he pasted all our Facebook statuses in this Petapixel article. And then it's been on a couple others now too. And so some guy on Instagram found me. He said, hey, Mike, I was reading these articles about this guy. I've been a big fan of him for a long, long time, and starting to kind of shatter me, realizing that that's obviously a fake photo, but he's lying about it. And so here's a photo I really liked of his, from Nebraska with a big moon in it. And he's like, do you think it's real? And I'm like, it looks like a wide angle shot of a road and a giant moon back there. And I go, I don't think that's possible. It's just, and I go, and then the guy was he's like, he tried to tell me that South Dakota is really flat or something. And so you can see stuff. And I'm like, okay. And so anyway, but there's something about that, I don't understand why, there's no reason, especially in this day and age, there's so many digital artists out there that create composites, and they're stunning. And I actually really like a lot of it. So I liked his photo, but then I started reading that he was passing off as true. And then I just changed my whole view of the whole thing. And I'm like, you lack integrity if you tell people that really happened. Like, that's a lie. And especially for us in a weather community, we get asked all the time, literally I posted a tornado video. I shared a tornado video yesterday, and someone goes, that's fake. And I go, no, it's not. I've seen multiple videos of it. It's not fake. And they're like, okay. But a lot of people will think it's fake. We try to be very precise and correct in what we're reporting and what we're sharing and what we're saying is true. And so then people see this photo, and he's telling them it's a true photo of a tornado and a storm, and people are like, oh my God, I didn't know things like that could happen. I'm like, they can't. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, you can't get you probably aren't going to get a tornado like that. And for someone to be able to set up a shot like he took with a tornado and a supercell in a barn and sunflowers that look like a, Mark Adamus kind of like foreground with it. No one, to have time to get a master shot like that's going to happen like once in your life. Right. You can't get that stuff to like work out like that. Yeah. And so anyway, it's just weird. Just own it and be proud of it. There's no reason to not tell people that, because here's my newest creation. The problem is I don't know how much of it's his. And that's probably why I just want to tell people. Yeah. Supercell shot might be his. I don't know where he got the tornado from. Maybe it's his photo from something else. Maybe it's a photo from someone else's. It's a great point, man. Like this whole thing, which is a huge debate between among photographers and ultimately the layman who then sees them. It's a really interesting thing because it seems like there's a lot of different factors that go into, what this mess all is. And I think part of it is like you mentioned the guy where you're like, well, why wouldn't he just want to be known as a digital artist versus a photographer? And I think that's an interesting question. Like maybe
maybe he got into this as a photographer, and so he just thinks of himself as a photographer, but then he kind of starts getting into these tangential things like photoshopping like different times a day, or whatever that's like how it starts, and then you go down and you just start putting in fake skies or whatever. And the fact of the matter is, like, some of those really good compositing artists, like a lot of guys you'll see do it with space. Like Derek Culver, like he's like heavy compositing. Like I don't think he is even trying to claim that.
And at some point you don't have to tell people anymore, because that's just, they know that's what you do. Yeah.
But like, to me, I look at people that do that really well and I'm like, dude, I can't do that.
No,
like that was amazing. Your level of being able to, have 50 different layers and just being able to do them so that it's like, look, I know that this isn't real, but like, holy shit, it sure looks like it is. Like that, you should be proud of that.
Good morning. Oh, did you just wake up? Okay, sorry. My daughter was saying I didn't know she needed something, and she's like, good morning. I'm like, did you just sorry.
Oh man. Becoming teenagers.
Yeah, she's only 11. It's over. It's done. She's a teenager already.
Oh man.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I've interrupted.
Oh, it's okay.
No, you're right about that stuff. Like I can't do that stuff at all. I can't do those composites. The people, there's a guy out there, I forget, his name's like Shavnor or something. Hopefully he's not listening to this, but he's stolen tons of Storm Chasers photos to make his art, and then he sells prints, and he just blocks people. He's personally taken a time lapse of mine, composited into like a tulip field from the Netherlands, and it actually was on MSNBC's like website as like a storm the night before in like North Dakota or something like that. And he might even have made money from it. And half of it was mine, and of course he's like blocked me and everybody else. And but the stuff that, I mean, he's a jerk and a punk for stealing stuff, but his imagery is unbelievable. The way he's able to like take the coast of like Miami and put a great supercell behind it and all stuff. I'm like, it's beautiful. I just wish you asked permission and got these things, correctly and legally and all that kind of stuff. But I can't do that stuff. And so people who do that digital art, I think is amazing. I love how they can come up with these things. I think it's great, but you just got to tell people that's what you're doing.
Yeah, you do. I wonder if maybe the reason that they don't do that, reason number one potentially is like, I want to be known as this photographer, and like, I like everyone's always looking for the coolest possible place that the other like influencers don't know about, and that's hard because most places have become known, in some capacity. It's hard to find these places that are not. So if you can kind of do that, even if it's fake imagery, it's like, I got to be the person that found this place. But I also think, like you mentioned earlier, like if you've composited anything, then does that also kind of open the box of like, well, how much of this is not yours? How much what else of this image is bullshit? And it's like, it kind of
how much
the
of
whole
the
community.
past is, and then people start, like this guy, like that messaged me on Instagram is probably like, so how many of these other images of yours aren't real that I thought were real, and that, maybe he just doesn't want people to know it. Maybe it's too late for him. He's at the point where he can't, if he says that, then people start questioning the stuff, or they bought a print from him under false I mean, the Petapixel article, I believe, really, it talked about Peter Lick issue where he had that crazy photo with the moon or whatever.
Yep. I was just going to mention that.
Yeah. He acted like it was real. And like, oh, there's clouds behind the moon. That makes sense, Yeah. And so they finally had to admit it was a composite and all this stuff. And it's like, there's just no reason to lie about that stuff. And if you have to do that to make yourself look good, then it's also means you have no confidence in like maybe who you are and what you're doing. And I don't know.
That story was really wild, man, especially because, but I think in Peter Lick's case, like, isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't he kind of, first of all, I guess he's like his prints sell for more than like anything ever in photography history,
makes millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah. What was that one? Like Phantom, or the one that's in
the Antelope Canyon.
Antelope Canyon. Yeah.
Yeah. Like $7 million or something.
Right. This is so absurd. And I think that his brand, like the way that he represents himself, is like single exposure images, like very, very little editing. Like that's kind of his thing. So I guess I could understand why he was like fighting tooth and nail on this. But what's interesting is that, like, to your point, the clouds behind it, like, it's not even that good of a composite. Like, it's any photographer that's taken like a moon picture with a zoom lens is like, you give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, it's like, I mean, it's Peter Lick. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but it seems kind of obvious.
Yeah. I mean, you can, if you have incredible planning, he could have gotten that shot, like with like a 1200 millimeter lens from the perfect spot to get that. But I mean,
with no haze at all.
No haze.
Like zero.
And also, like, the moon that zoomed in is going to actually be moving fast. So you have to take a really fast shot. You have to expose enough for that and the tree to look good. So I don't know. I think it was just the clouds behind the moon is what gave it away.
Right.
Like, that's not real. I mean, if you have clouds in the shot, they have to go in front of the moon. So what happened there? So that, I mean, obviously gave it away, but I don't, and it's kind of crazy that he would think no one would have noticed that.
Right.
If I'm compositing in something, I'd be like, well, that's not right. I got to have a freaking, the clouds don't look normal. I got to figure that out. So,
yeah. I mean, it's almost like, and I don't know the guy, and I don't either. Perfectly nice guy, but like, yeah, it almost, it's like a little, I guess, like with any industry, if you get to the point where you are so beloved to where people will spend millions of dollars on it, so like you probably are a little bit in a bubble and don't even realize how absurd it is that you try to pass it off that way.
I don't know anything about him. I know that I think a lot of people kind of think he's really, he's really good at marketing and branding and selling his stuff, but I don't know that he's like a colleague in the landscape photography world. Like, I think he's his own like entity. I don't know that he's like that. I actually am just speculating. So I literally have no idea, but from like what I've heard people talk about and stuff, I don't know that he's like part of that landscape photography community where like he and Mark Adamus and these guys are all like really good friends. I feel like he's his own thing by himself. And so when he fakes a photo, like, to him, it doesn't matter. He didn't know that there'd be, like you said, he's probably had no clue that there was like, he's in a bubble. He had no clue that there'd be like outrage about it or that people would call him out on it. I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I think your speculation is probably accurate. Cause I was just thinking, like, I don't think he's hanging out with like, Mike Sadowski and Shane Bloom and Elia Liccardi and like that. I don't think that's how it works.
No, I don't think so, but who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, man, it's the whole compositing thing is a really interesting conversation. I never know exactly how one should feel about it. I got into it a little bit with Yuri Beletsky. We were talking about it a little bit. I don't know if you know Yuri.
I don't know if I do.
He's in Chile. He's like an actual astronomer.
Cool.
But he also does like all kinds of creative, night sky stuff as well. So he's kind of this unique person that probably shouldn't exist. Like, he's a scientist and also he's creative.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was talking about how big of like how mad people get about that in the Milky Way and the night sky.
Oh yeah. Well, because it's such I mean, I would think there's a lot of people doing that stuff, and so when one person's getting like crazy attention or whatever, and everyone's like, but you're just slapping two photos together. It's kind of like, I'm actually out here doing one image and trying to get it to look like that instead of you just kind of taking the easy way out and making something not real that blows people's minds. Because it's, to me, as long as you tell people these are creations, this is digital art, this is me like painting something, then it shouldn't, that's fine. I mean, it's like people paint pictures and make up stuff. So why can't I do the same thing digitally with photos? Like, I should be able to make something up, but you just really got to be honest about it. That's just, to me, that's just kind of the bottom line. Like, you're not going to stop people from doing that. And I don't think there's any reason to. I really like a lot of it. So I feel like they need to be honest. And I've done my fair share of like stacking lightning photos together. Or, I had a lightning bolt in one photo that was really sharp, but the clouds were either soft or the camera had a little bit of a shake. And then the next frame, it's perfectly sharp. So I take those two and I blend them together because I'm not really changing anything. That single frame wasn't perfect because the lightning bolt was, but the clouds, the camera shook or something like the 4 seconds that it took a shot. So the next one is sharp. put them together, it's the next frame after, it doesn't really affect what's actually happening in the image. It's still accurate representation of what I saw. Or if you Photoshop out a little power line or stuff on the ground, like, do I really have to have a photo with like a piece of trash on the ground or one barbed wire fence post sticking up that's a very distraction in the bottom right? Like, it's not necessarily falsely representing the scene. A lot of people, there's a certain, I think, level of that kind of photoshopping that is acceptable. Yeah, it's okay. Like, you want to fix some things. It's just not, you're going to crop your photo. This is exactly how I shot it. Like you said earlier, like, sometimes I crop stuff. It doesn't look so bad, because you kind of salvaged your mistake of not aiming correctly or whatever. And so we got to do that. But I think, but when I have stacked lightning photos, I say what it is. Like, this is a stacked photo of like 12 different images over over 15 minutes. This all happened in 15 minutes and these are all stacked together and blah, blah, blah. And so I definitely try to make sure people know that when they say, is this a single exposure? Like, no, it's a bunch. Like, don't think it's one. This doesn't happen this way.
Yeah. Although it could have been, if you think about it,
could have been.
Put a monster filter on there. It could have been. Yeah.
You could have done like a 2-minute exposure and had like 10 or 12 CGs in there. It would look a lot different, but you could have. And that's the other part. Like, I didn't. They're all individual exposures, but it is over. Like, this was over 5 minutes, so it could have made it one if I wanted to. But it could blow out and got real messy and stuff, and so you try to do it in a different way. But you're right. You're right.
Yeah, your point about like kind of masking in one, like across 2 exposures because of little camera shake, I find that to be so inoffensive. And frankly, I don't know if you do this, but like, I'm doing that in time lapses all the time. If I get a little camera shake and you're playing back and you find that one frame in like After Effects,
right,
and I'll just mask out like all the shaky buildings. I'll go to the adjacent frame. I'll add a layer and I'll pull that layer back.
I mean, that's great. I mean, I do that with if like a truck drove by or there's a bird, just mask out the bird in the middle of the time lapse so it doesn't appear. Or if a truck, I've had a truck drive by really kind of annoyingly, and so I just mask out the truck in every frame to get it out of the time lapse because it's distracting or whatever.
Right. Does like you've sold some stuff to like National Geographic and some organizations like that, have you?
Yeah, I mean, probably almost everybody. It's a huge part of my business. Yeah.
First of all, that's really fucking cool. By the way,
freaking amazing. I'm really blessed. I mean, I'm literally like, I'm working on Storm Chaser. Reed Timmer is he was chasing this year with Nat Geo's filming him, and because of the pandemic they couldn't have anyone with them, so they're trying to use some of my time lapses that I shot kind of on storms he was on, is B-roll kind of thing, because they couldn't have someone else along. I'm helping 2 BBC productions this year trying to capture like monsoon footage. I can't really say anything else, but I was also trying to work with another Nat Geo product. I mean, there's a Liam Neeson movie coming out, I think at some point, set here in Arizona, like a border ranch farmer who saved some refugees from Mexico, and they licensed like a single shot for the film. It's like my 5th major feature film licensing a clip. It's like,
that's so sick,
second
man.
Thor movie, Geostorm, I think Alpha. It's on one of the channels on Netflix or something. And then what was the other one? It's the Artemis Fowl that's on Disney that just came out, which I've heard is really, really bad. So I can't even bring myself to watch it to see where the clip might have been used. So I'm very, very, I feel like it's become a big part of my business, and I made a name for myself because even though there's other people time lapsing, I've been doing it for a while. And I have been doing it with these 50 megapixel cameras for a long time now, where all my footage is over 8K resolution. Right. And so I have a massive library of 8K footage. And so I've kind of just made a name for myself, and so people know me now. So I'm really lucky. So if they need something, or like, hey, we need something for the monsoon and dust storms, like, we know to call Mike. Like, they know that I'm the one who does it out there because I'm freaking obsessed with it anyway. Right. So that's been really, really, when I got into this, like I said, I've loved the weather my whole life. So when I got into this, I had a dust storm video go viral in 2011, and and another one in 2013 for a supercell. And this is all stuff I love. And I just never even knew that there was a way to make money doing this. So none of this was like a planned thing. It's kind of, to me, it's like all out of, having passion for something, trying to do it really, really well. And then finding out that people also like it and use it and need it for something.
Yeah.
And so now so that's when, after I started shooting that early on in 2011 and realized that people actually wanted to license it for this dust storm footage for something, I'm like, well, I need to get more. Like, I love doing this and I need to go. So then it became like, just a mission to shoot more and more stuff. And then I shot, and then I, threw a dart at a calendar and went out on June 3rd in 2013 and went to go chase a storm. We end up on this storm by Booker, Texas. That was like one of the best storms of the summer. And my time lapse of it, it's one of my best, one of the best storms I've ever seen. Still one of my all time for sure favorites, probably like number 2 or something. And, posted that time lapse just thinking like, I really like it. I hope people like it. And it was number 1 video on Vimeo in 2013, like 2 million plays. And I didn't post it till I think I posted in June or July. So I guess I did.
Half the year still. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and so it was really cool to me that not only did I love doing this, but other people loved seeing it. And especially with that one, I found some music that I thought was really dramatic and really fit what I was looking at. And that, I think, was my first like real kind of venture into trying to do, create these little films to music. And if I have a strength, if any of my strengths are, really good at chasing and being on the right side of storms and being disciplined, I also think I somehow have gotten pretty decent at music for these films. And you'll see a lot of time-lapse films and a lot of these films out there that will just use music, and sometimes it just doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. People don't try to really make it tell a story, to have like, like a big ending. Like, it's just kind of like, here's a bunch of Milky Way and here's a bunch of this and here's a song, and there's not a lot of thought behind it.
Yeah.
Maybe. I know people try for sure, but I definitely think it's one of those things that you get better at maybe after a while. I don't know.
Sometimes I think that you can't even start the editing process until you have found the song. Yeah, because it's like you find a song, and I don't like with me, it's like, it's got to really hit me. Like, not to sound sappy, but it has to almost be like an emotional experience.
You brought up the Reverent one. I wasn't even sure I was going to make that film until these people sent me their music. And I usually get sent a lot of music from people because they want me to use it and stuff. And most of it is just nothing. Like, they're like, I think this really matches your style. And I play it and I'm like, that doesn't match me at all. Like, it's total, it's like folksy and weird, like fast paced, happy stuff. I'm like, I'm not about happy. I'm about overly dramatic and like intense, like Interstellar kind of, music and stuff.
Yep.
And, but these people sent me this song, a couple songs, and I listened to one and I'm like, oh my God, there's something about this song that really sticks out to me. Like, I feel like I can almost, they were coming to me to use my footage for their music video, not even wanting to let me use their song. And I listened to their song. I'm like, okay, I'm going to let you use it if I can use your song for free.
That's really cool.
And they're like, let's do it. And so, that the same, exactly what you said. Like, I wouldn't have even thought about, I wasn't going to maybe do something until I heard that song. And then I was inspired by it to just like, okay, now I want to throw it down on Premiere and start dropping clips and see what I can come up with
like
this.
You got excited to do it.
I love it. If I have music and a song, like that's the hardest part. Like you said, is picking, a lot of times it's picking out a song, fine. But then when you hear that one where you're like, okay, I can visualize what I'm going to do with this, and you drop it, that's the fun part. Then you can start editing and dropping clips on there and matching things up. And for me, that's, I think that's where I really do a good job. And I'm really obsessed about it. I mean, if I post this new film on Tuesday, I must have watched it 100, 200 times already, like just over and over. And I'll be like, nope, that didn't fit. What, this song has a weird, like whoosh tail off. Like what is the perfect clip so that it matches this like whoosh sound or something? Or there'd be some part of the track to me that is like, almost sounds like something spinning, like the way that it's like repeating, it sounds like spinning. So I need something in here that looks like it's spinning to match the music or whatever. And I think that's where you got to really be obsessed. And that's kind of like, instead of just throwing a track down and dropping clips down and being like, cool, it kind of matches, let's go. And you almost have to be like insanely obsessed and watch it over and over. And the downside to all that is by the time I'm done with it and want to post it, I think it's garbage.
Yep.
Like I literally have to send it to friends. And I sent this to friends the other day, and I had 3 of them that they're wedding photographer, video people that don't necessarily, they don't get into storms, but they were like, Mike, I almost cried watching that. I'm like, okay, that's good.
Good. Pretty much what you needed to hear.
I can't tell anymore if it's good. So.
Yeah. Dude, it's awesome to hear you say that. I can't even tell you how many times I think that and I go, am I like some kind of a psycho, or like, is this what people think? Because the more like either a time lapse or a photo that I was like, really spending time on, like hours. Yeah. I will get to a point where it's like, I am incapable of being objective. And it's difficult to be objective for your own shit anyway. Yeah. But it's like, I'm no longer excited about it because that sort of honeymoon period of, I got this image, like that has worn off. Yeah. And now you're just sort of, you're so in the weeds of like just finding little fucking hot pixels and things, like just you're doing the boring stuff. Yeah. And you've seen it so many times, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, this could be terrible, or it could be amazing, or it could be so. I have no idea. Yep. It's really a weird thing. It's a very, very weird thing. And I've had that experience with images too. And also the opposite, where I've had an image I'm so excited about like this year that I sat on it, for over like a month and a half. And when I finally posted it, it didn't go over as well as I thought, even though I was like, this is like my favorite image of lightning I've shot in like years. And it didn't go over as well. And then I posted a photo yesterday, which is also really good, but I don't know that I don't know which one I would have picked between my favorite. It might've been the one that didn't do so well personally. Yeah. But the one I posted yesterday, like kind of went crazy. I mean, it wasn't like viral or anything, but I got a lot of people going, what, are you kidding me with this photo? And I'm like, so this is the one that people freaked out about, but the other one that I really liked, they didn't. So sometimes you can kind of, especially if you're excited about something and it's not. The funny thing about the time-lapse videos, I'm excited about them for a little bit until I've watched them too much. And I can't, like you said, I can't be objective anymore. And so it is nice during this process. I've kind of gotten it down enough where I have a whole process of how I edit and watch it and make sure it's good. And then I always release it on like a Tuesday morning, for some reason, superstitious now. And then before that though, I send it to like really trusted, like friends of mine, like Martin Heck. He's busy shooting freaking comets and not so loud, so he hasn't looked at it. Yeah. But I've sent it to some people to have them look at it just so I can get, and have my wife look at it as well. Like, tell me what you think. And like the non-photographer type of non-photographer, but also photographer, just people that know my work. Do they think it matches up to what I've done in the past? And like I've had my buddies have seen all my stuff. I've been friends with them for like 8 years, and they're like, Mike, they could also just be blowing smoke, and maybe they don't know what considered good as much as me. But one of them's like, oh, I think this might be one of your best that you've done. And I'm like, that's really great to hear. I also don't know if I actually believe it, but it is like, but it is one of those things that, it's nice to get that, especially when you're down in the dumps and you think you're not, what you're putting. I'm sure that there's, we're watching these, I don't know if you watch the Frozen, I don't know if you have kids, but the Frozen on Disney Plus, they came out with this Frozen 2 docuseries. And whether you like the movie or not, the docuseries, unbelievably good. I mean, it just shows how much work and effort and like QA, QC kind of stuff that goes into these movies, where they show it to people over and over, and people go, I didn't really understand that part. And they go back to the drawing board and they go, okay, we gotta write this better. Then they showed it to family with kids, and they came out of it realizing the adults kind of got it, but the kids were a little confused on what was happening. So they had to rewrite a lot of things and put in parts so kids could better understand the story. And so they get it to a point where they're like, this is as good as we can get it. We've ran it through everybody at here. We've redone the editing. We've rewritten the movie 25 times. We've shown it to audiences, gotten their feedback, and now we're ready to finally put it out there. And it's a very fascinating, like I actually got emotional like a few times watching that, because these people are, I mean, that's a whole other topic, but watching them like write they're writing these songs, and they have all these animation, and then they sit there to record an orchestra
playing with this stuff. And there are all these directors and people there that are really into it. I mean, they love this stuff, and they sit there and they hear the orchestra and the choir singing, and they start crying because they see like all
they've imagined this.
Life. Yeah, they've imagined it for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was a very, if you're an artist and get inspired by that stuff, like filmmaker, I think it's really neat to watch. But anyway, it's kind of like that. Like you don't really know, like, are people going to get this, what I'm putting together? Does it make sense? Am I telling the story correctly? And, I posted on my Patreon page. I sent to a few people, just some people on my Patreon page. They're at a certain level where they get to see these films before anybody else. So it's kind of like a perk. And so a couple of them, gave me great feedback and said I really loved how it just ramped up right up to like the sublet storm at the end. Like you really fit all, so it's kind of nice to get that boost of confidence and it's, I don't know, it's helpful because you get too sunk into the editing that you forget, maybe the magic of what you had captured in the first place, and everything just is starting to look boring to you.
Totally.
I mean, I literally was done last week or earlier this week. I was done going, and I looked at it and I was like, and I started looking for new music. Like I literally went to Music Bed and I went to all these sites and I started looking for new music because I instantly hated everything I did.
Yeah.
And then, but then I showed it to some people and they all loved the music, and I'm like, okay, no, I'm being stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, but it's so true, man. Like the pairing of music and video is very weird too, because like there is no like rule book really. I mean, obviously there are certain consistencies that like work or don't work, but it is solely based on your own, how you feel when you hear that and whether or not it makes sense and do you have a vision. And it really is one of those crazy creative things that just, it only came from your brain, and people are either going to feel it or they're not. Yeah. It's really a wild thing.
No, it's it's very, at this point, I like, even going back to what we said earlier, like there's pressure. I feel like there's pressure almost on me a little bit because everyone's, I'll post little sneaks like, oh, I'm working on this. I did it on Twitter last night. Here's like, I was watching on my big TV. So I posted a short clip of like the title, and, people on Twitter that are friends are like, oh, so excited. Like 2020 needs your film right now and stuff like that. And I'm like, all of a sudden now there's like pressure. Like, I feel like I need to match what I've done in the past. Like, I don't want it to suck, I don't want to like regress somehow. And, so in the past it used to be, I'd put them out and they were kind of new and different, and people were like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before. And now I've done it so many times now that I've got to live up to expectations. So it's just like,
right.
Again, not comparing myself to these people, but I'm sure like, Steven Spielberg did some movies and suddenly getting good, feedback and reputation. He's like, okay, God, now my next movie's got to be good. Like I have to like, I can't do a crappy movie. I got to do something to live up to like my, previous expectations. So you want to keep getting better. So I don't know.
Have you ever seen any of the footage of Steven Spielberg working with, John Williams, where they're like, they're
maybe
he's sort of talking to the orchestra, but then he's looking back to Steven, and then they're looking at the screen for like the unedited footage and stuff. And I've seen like a couple clips of things like that, and it's like you're watching this, and it's just like these guys like invented the magic of like sci-fi and that kind of thing. Like they created all that, and it's like you're watching these two guys basically be so unbelievably particular, but like, well, you're going to see a fin here, so why don't we have like a timpani do a little thing? Or I mean, it's like that level of precision is so unbelievable.
Yep. And that's exactly like what I try to do on a smaller scale on these. Is there's certain parts of a song or whatever that has a certain vibe to it. And I forget which film it was, maybe the first Vorticity or Pursuit, but there was this part where I matched the music up, and it was very kind of unfolding dramatic. And I used a shelf cloud that would look very kind of plain, but as it came across, it rolled over, and then it just was green and blues, and it was rolling like freaking ocean. And it's one, I've licensed it a few times. It's everybody's favorite, like almost favorite moment from the whole film is that part. And I'm like, no other clip that I had would have worked with that music as good as that one did. There's just nothing else. And so it's like, kind of like, that's kind of awesome to hear, hear those guys saying that this is coming by. We need this right here.
Yeah.
Because it's funny because I'll get comments from people, and they're very rare, but they'll be like, I don't like the music. I just wish you would have just put in nature sounds and lightning and rain and all that stuff. And I'm like, I always joke around. I'm like, if you wanted the sounds of actually what was happening, there was me talking with my cameras clicking. It was other people driving by. It wasn't a serene moment.
Right. It wasn't that cool when I was shooting it. Yeah.
I mean, the sounds were great, but there's also a lot of other stuff going on. And so anyway, but I'm like, and they say, I don't understand why you use the music. Like, it's just, you're trying to do too. I'm like, we have used music, forever to like create emotion in movies and just songs that we listen to. And so those, I don't know, music moves me in all these films. I mean, I have a whole, like, on my phone when I chase, I have a whole like soundtrack, like the best soundtracks, and they're all from things that just really have moved me, from Interstellar, Arrival, but Battlestar Galactica, like all these tracks.
Interstellar is a great call, by the way.
Interstellar is probably one of the best sci-fi soundtracks ever made.
Oh my God.
I mean,
I have some particular moments of that film where I'll say to my wife, I'll be like, did you see how they, like, when they transition, they kept the, like what's the one where they transition out of, I think it's this really cool shot, like almost like a flyby shot of Saturn. And then you like hear thunder and lightning, but they like kind of stay on Saturn.
I need to watch it again.
Second.
I haven't watched it as much as I've listened to the sound. I've seen it like twice, but I need to watch it again. My problem with that movie is I end up in tears because I have a little girl, and when he leaves her, It was funny. I was supposed to see that movie with my buddies that I actually sent the film to that I was telling you about, that were telling me this good stuff. I was supposed to go see it on like a Monday because we all work for ourselves, but they all like freaking like bailed on me for some reason. Like, they weren't, I'm like, are you guys kidding me right now? So I went to watch it by myself. And when afterwards I was like, I'm glad I watched it by myself because I was freaking like, I bawled in like multiple, but when he's leaving his daughter behind, it was just, I was like, I almost couldn't handle it. I mean, I have a little girl, and like, I could not handle what that guy was going through, leaving her behind. And then later when they do the time, when he goes down the plane, the time jump, and he comes up and he sees all these videos. I was like, so watching it again is like kind of gut wrenching. Like, it's a very emotionally like kind of draining movie. Cause then he's, at the end, then he sees her older and like all this, and like with a family, and he wasn't a part of like,
and then it's so weird. It's
so weird. And it was all a sacrifice for them, what he was doing in the first place. So he was doing something good, but he lost all this time with them.
Right.
And it's such a, anyway, so that's why I haven't watched it very much. I just love the soundtrack, but
and of course it was done by
Columbus Nolan.
Nolan did this.
You mean Hans Zimmer? You mean
Hans Zimmer. Yeah.
Yeah. Hans Zimmer is awesome. Have you seen the video of him on that movie working on that soundtrack? You should look that up.
I may have. I saw something. I don't know if I saw.
It's a short one. It's a short, like couple, like 3 or 4 minutes, where he tells the story of how Nolan or something said, I want you to write a song for this that's just about your like a father's love for his kid or something, like a dad's love for his son. Like, he didn't tell him anything about the movie, that it was sci-fi or anything. He said, write a song that is something about this.
That's right. And so I think that's where the organ came from, right? That was his decision to use the...
Yeah, and then at the rest of that, they show that they traveled to like Europe, to somewhere, to some monster church with one of the biggest like pipe organs on the planet. And they had an old guy playing it or whatever. And I'm like... And it's funny because there's another one. I don't want to go on a tangent about soundtracks, but there's another one that some people did on Vimeo a few years ago about how you don't know any of the music in the Marvel movies. Like, at the time, you do. I think you do now. After Infinity War and Endgame, the music is definitely like the Avengers, theme is definitely more. Everyone can probably sing it now. But they were asking people on the street, what's the Star Wars theme? And they're like, they would do that in all these movies, Back to the Future, whatever. And they go, what about something from like the Marvel movies? And they're like, huh. And like, no one could do no one could think of it. And so they went into this whole thing about how a lot of music these days was very like, directors would be like, they'd send them a clip of something else, or they would edit it with music from another movie temporarily for like a feel. And then these people they tell these directors to like, well, I want something like this. And then they want to kind of keep it similar. So they change it a little bit, but not to copy the previous person. So anyway, it was just, they were showing how a lot of movies are the composing and the music is not as original as it used to be. Like
Right.
it's just very kind of boring and plain and kind of, and so anyway, so then, it's like kind of like, wow, like I didn't even think about that stuff. And there's a whole crew, they had like Danny Elfman and these people talking about that stuff. And it was very fascinating how they felt like almost like they can't be as creative as they used to be because the directors will tell them to, and so, but anyway, so then you watch the Hans Zimmer one, and it was literally like, he told him, think about a father's love for his son. And then he's like, just do what you want with it. And then they come up with this and they go record a pipe. It was all so original and new. That's why like, it's like it's like the best sci-fi soundtrack, like I think ever.
Yeah.
Because it just was so like it fit the movie so well, but it wasn't even like, he didn't see it first. Like it was amazing how it like somehow matched up. I mean, he did at some point he must have. I mean, at some point it was like a composing for things he was seeing, but he came up with the theme and like overall kind of vibe.
Yeah, I remember seeing the movie in the theater and thinking like I was somewhat conscious of the music when I was listening to it.
Yeah,
not enough to like really have a significant thought about it, but I remember like especially the organ stuff. I remember kind of thinking like almost like it's a little unusual, but not the thought was still too abstract to form the thought this is unusual. But it was like there was something about it that was just so unique to hear like, and I can even picture what the melody is on the organ. They're like, like that.
But and it's funny because there's a lot of organ pipes and there's a lot of parts that are different though. Like when they're on the planet and there's the mountain one with the big water like miles high coming at them, like it's just this big explosive kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then there's the softer. I don't know, man. It's just great.
Yeah,
I haven't heard one.
It's really good.
If you haven't listened to the Arrival one or haven't seen Arrival, that's another very good kind of spooky-ish.
Is it?
Have you seen that movie?
Like the new Arrival.
The Arrival
or the
with
old?
What's her name? Anna. No, it's not Anna Kendrick. It's the other girl.
But from the Wedding Crashers movie, right?
I think so. But they did the. Oh, it's good, dude. It's a really good sci-fi.
Sacha Baron Cohen's wife. Right?
Really?
Sasha Baron Cohen's wife. I think so. Yeah.
He's married to her?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Well, let me look it up. It's
I think.
Oh my God. Amy Adams.
Amy Adams, yeah. So
she's married to Sacha Baron Cohen?
I'm pretty sure. Maybe she's not anymore, but she definitely was at some point.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, dude, it's a fantastic. I mean, it's one of I love every few years there's a really good like sci-fi film. Interstellar was one, and then Arrival, dude. It's not exactly what you think is happening, but the fact that the trying to learn how to speak to aliens with like language was just fascinating, and the music is really good. Like it's not. I don't know if I put up there with Interstellar, but it's definitely like a very very. I think his name was Johan Johansson. I think he might have died actually too. Okay, the composer, but it's very. It's very cool.
So it's sort of like an homage to Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, I mean, think of it as something like that. I mean, it's very, but there's a lot more going on. It's like a little twisty and stuff, and there's just, but it's but she goes into the ship, and you see it in the preview, so it didn't really give anything away. But there's just like there's like a glass, and it's foggy, and the aliens are like on the other side. You don't know what they look like, and you don't know, and they're trying to figure out this language and how to like speak. And why they're there and all this stuff. And it's just, it's just great. I don't know. I love that stuff. There hasn't been very many. I think the other one after that was not Prometheus. It was the one with Natalie Portman where she goes into the Annihilation.
Okay. Yeah.
And I really like that one too. I don't know if it was as good. It's definitely a vague ending and stuff, but I really like that one too. Those kind of, I crave those kind of sci-fi movies, man.
Yeah, like the more abstract ideas.
The more abstract ones with very original like ideas, really good music. There's a couple years ago called Sunshine and Moon. They were very original, different. Sunshine is probably really lesser known than most movies, but it's really good sci-fi. And Moon had that the dude from Quiz Show, whatever his name is, and Sam Rockwell, I think. That was great.
Oh, really?
Freaking great movie. And So anyway, it's really, I love that stuff. I don't see enough. I try to find those like hidden gems of those kind of movies whenever I can. They're hard to find.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool, man.
Anyway, you got me talking about soundtracks and I started losing my mind.
I'm the same way. I'm a musician first and a photographer second, even though I like don't really play any music anymore. Like I'll always feel like that was what I was like supposed to do, but I'm just not, you know?
Yeah. Well, you should follow Pecos. Besides me, there's a guy named Pecos Hank on YouTube that storm chases, but he's got a band and it's very twangy, like, and also like all his videos are great. I mean, he's got like a beautiful, like narrating voice for his, very smart. But all the music on there is all like his music in the background.
Oh, that's cool.
So he plays and he catches snakes and saves turtles on the sides of the roads and stuff. I mean, he's a legend, man. He's got like, I don't know, 700,000 subscribers on YouTube or something. He's like the best. Everyone's like, he's like the best storm chaser.
Yeah.
But, anyway, he's a musician too. And, he's into, storm chasing video and art and stuff. So just like you.
Yeah, that's cool. What was his name again?
Pecos Hank.
Pecos Hank. I'll
find him on here and send you his channel in the chat.
Okay. Well, dude, we've been talking for 2.5 hours.
Long, man. I should go.
That's crazy.
I think what happens is I don't want to do too much, but I really do love talking about this stuff and sharing it with people. So I know that's probably why I was like, I can only do a little bit because I'll get way too into talking about it.
Well, I have to give myself a little credit here and say that I seem to be able to extract stuff out of people quite well.
Well, you do. You do a real good job of actually. You don't look like you have questions really prepared, but you listen and then kind of ask questions based off of the conversation. So it's good.
I talk to people that I want to talk to. It's really it's that simple. Like I would do the same thing if the two of us were like grabbing beers somewhere like this.
Yeah, that's great
conversation. I think.
Yeah. I've wanted to do my own. Like I've been wanting to do like a podcast or something for a while. Like some kind of something with like storm chasers that are my friends or something to have them just talk about life and what they're doing and try not to make it just all about photography and stuff, but more about, other stuff. But it's, but I'm like, I don't know how good I would be at interviewing and asking people questions. So, but kind of having a back and forth discussion is really interesting. So I might have to, I still want to try to do it, but I want it to be good. So,
yeah. Well, I find that the sort of the formal interview style to me, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's obviously been legendary interviews throughout history, but like, in my opinion, if there were two ways to ask a question and get to an answer, one way was just like, we're not going to necessarily develop a bunch of rapport or whatever. I'm just going to ask you this question because I'm curious versus like, we're going to weave and zig and zag through all these other things and then eventually arrive at this place where we're both kind of feeling good about this moment. Yeah. I would bet 1,000 times out of 1,000 that answer is going to be much more genuine and authentic that time. And so I like that kind of stuff. I like listening to podcasts for that reason. Yeah,
no, I agree. I mean, I do. And I like that. I gotten, not as much, kind of got a little away from, but I really was for a while. They're really into all the, like Dak Shepard's podcast and Conan O'Brien's really funny. That's why I really liked it. But he would have Dak would have long conversations with people and you really get different answers. And I really liked all those because he would talk, it was kind of like us. He would talk to artists and actors. And of course, there's all kinds of hate today for people that make money in art and actor just because Christian Bale is so famous and he has so much money. Like, how could he have any problems? And I'm like, everybody's still human. And so it's really, like one of the best ones that Dak did, he was talking to Bill Hader, from SNL, doing all those skits, and you find out what an insecure person he is, and actually like the anxiety he has every time he goes on stage. And you're like, wait a second, Bill Hader does like Stefan. He's freaking hilarious. The dude can't do anything wrong. But for him to go out on stage, you find out how terrifying it is, and how half the time he's laughing is because he's like, when he was breaking, it was like because he's nervous and he's got anxiety, and he's like, and so those, long form discussions allow, those kind of things to come out in a more meaningful way. So I totally agree. That was really fascinating. Like you hear that stuff and you're like, I like hearing these kind of things that maybe I also kind of struggle with, in different ways. And it's very interesting.
Yeah. Every single photographer that I have talked to, no matter how not known or known they have been, all seem to have at least some of that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Michael Shainblum was like the first guy that really, really kind of made me realize it's like he was like, oh man, I don't even know if I should go to Patagonia, because if I go, I'll just be reproducing the same images that everybody else has. I'm like, you're Michael Shainblum. Like, what are you talking about? And it's just amazing, No,
it doesn't. It doesn't. And I feel I have like a lot of insecurities when I'm out there. I know like there, everyone taught in like some of these world, I'm sure like in Michael Shainblum's world of like landscape photography, there's a lot of like backstabbing, negative talk, like kind of, I've seen it on like 500 pics when I was on there, like people like giving people crap about stuff and going to the same location. I'm sure there's all that. So in the storm chasing community, there's also like a lot of drama and stuff. And I try really hard to stay away from it. But there have been like, there's people out there that will say things about me. There's a guy or two that will still kind of, he'll throw out, I don't follow him or anything, but I know I'll hear about it, that he'll say something like, I didn't even have to, I chased this great storm today. I didn't even have to cancel a wedding shoot to be here because I shot weddings and stuff like that. And said stuff about me being like someone who just, I'm not a wedding photographer just trying to have videos go viral or something like. And other people have said I was only on like a certain storm, and these are very tiny little comments by certain people. Like Mike was only on that storm because he had help from other people who didn't know how to get there. And so I am constantly like almost trying to prove myself. And even like my buddy Brett, we've done these kind of tours together the last few years. And so he's in the car and he's a better forecaster than me. Like there's just no way. I mean, obviously it's quantifiably better than me at forecasting. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm a photographer. I know enough, but he's freaking sees all kinds of stuff. And so when I chase with him and we get on good storms, part of me is insecure. Like some people are like, well, Mike was only there because he had Brett with him. Or the only reason we dropped off the storm, went to the other one and got this really good structure is because Brett said, we should ditch this storm and go to a different one. So there's a lot of times when I want to chase on my own, which I do, to prove to myself that I know how to do this and I do it on my own and I don't need anybody's help, because it's just I can be very insecure about, all that stuff. Am I doing a good job? Is anyone going to like this? Do I even belong here? Am I, when people say, people will, I'm well known in the storm chasing community. Obviously you found me and all this stuff. And so people, people know my work and they look forward to it and stuff, but it still doesn't mean anything to me sometimes. I'm like, it's not like I'm like, everyone knows me, I'm awesome. And so I don't have nothing to worry about. I'm still like, sometimes don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I'm good enough for this stuff. I'm not a good enough forecaster, and I don't always, look at everything. And so that insecurity is definitely there. But I don't mind it also, because I feel like it keeps me, like, that kind of stuff keeps me humble, and it keeps me trying to just always be better and not complacent and not think I've got it made and I'm really good at this and I don't even need to try anymore. Like it just comes like I don't feel like that. I feel like I suck and I have to get better at it. So the having the pressure is good. I think for that reason. Well, if it makes any difference, my experience of how I even was introduced to the character of Mike Olbinski was because there's a guy, I don't know if you've heard of Scott Aspinall is his name. He's a great photographer. He lives in like Saskatchewan, I think. He lives like out there. Yeah. And he does a little bit of storm chasing. I assume up where he lives. He does a lot of different stuff. He's a great nights guy. He's pretty versatile. Anyway, he posted a couple like really good like storm cell photos on Instagram, like during sunset, just like all the good ingredients for a great viral type of photo. And I started talking to him and I was like, dude, I would love to, do some storm chasing. I've just never had a chance to do it. So blah, blah. And he's like, oh dude, like don't waste your time with me. He's like, Mike Olbinski, like he's the guy, like that's the dude that you need to, that's crazy. So he would, it was like, he didn't even like take credit. It was almost like, he was like, oh, thanks. But like, here's the guy you need to follow. Wow. Well, and I hear that stuff and it's always mind blowing. So that's cool. That's crazy. I know that, it's nice to like hear those kind of things. And I get those messages a lot where people are doing time lapse or trying to do this stuff because they see my work and they'll be inspired by it. And and as much as I hear it, it's still, it hasn't, at least at this point, it hasn't like gone to my head. And that's why I feel like I really actually kind of relish sometimes the insecurity of not thinking that I'm, great at this, because I think it can lead to places that I don't want to be. I don't want to be that person who thinks he's got it made, and I don't want to be that person. So hearing that stuff is great. I mean, that's what people that are into time lapsing, they'll say like, I don't want to, this is just so funny, but like I'll see a great time lapse or see a great photo of someone that's been shared on Facebook, and I'll comment on it like, this is great, like, well done. And they'll respond like, and they already know me, and they're like, oh my gosh, like you,
Michael
Olbinski,
means a lot. Yeah, they're like,
yeah. I mean, I'll get that. And I didn't know that for a while. It didn't dawn on me till it started happening more. And I'm like, I didn't even know that this would matter to people. And so, now I'm trying to, like, sometimes I'm like, I see a really great stuff and I try to leave a comment because I'm like, they did a really good job. And I don't know if it's going to mean anything that I say anything, but I want them to know it was really great. And I'm proud of like the work they did. And so anyway, that's still half the time I'm like, I don't know, I'm missing tornadoes like yesterday, and it makes me feel like I suck at everything I do. Right. And I don't know, like I'm gonna put out this film and people are gonna be like, where's the Minnesota tornadoes in it? That's the automatic thing, I think. So
yeah. Well, dude, it is meaningful to answer, if it wasn't a question, but to answer it regardless. Like, it is meaningful, especially in the time lapse community, which is a fairly small, but at least in terms of like the good people, it is meaningful when somebody like you, or somebody like Matt Van de Pute, or like Martin Heck, or any of these guys that have like officially, Emmerich officially made it. To say like, agreed, dude, great work with this one. Like, I like how you did blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh my God, that's like, you know what? I am going to wake up early for that sunset tomorrow. It's like, sometimes that's the difference. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, it is. And it's nice when those people say that. And I don't know, I've been inspired along the way where I've had, people that I look up to, do the same thing for me after. I'm like, oh my God, like, like a while back, a little different now than it was then, but back then, Drew Geraci did the opening credits for House of Cards, like I don't know if you watch House of Cards, but all the time lapse footage, that was great. I love the intro.
That's awesome.
Now, I didn't know him too well, but then at one point I friended him. I saw that he was on Facebook, and I friended him, and he said something. He's like, "Oh, I love your Storm stuff, Mike. It's great." And I'm like, "What?
Yeah,
the guy who did House of Cards knows my stuff. Are you kidding?" Like, and he said it was great.
I'm talking to you about your stuff. This isn't how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, it was neat. It was very just kind of like, I'm like, I didn't, I don't always know how far reaching like my stuff goes and what people know and all that kind of stuff. So those kind of things are really, they're great to hear. And so that's why I try hard. I'm not always the nicest guy. Like I said before, I'm very competitive. And sometimes if I see something and I'm like, look, I don't, I'm tired of seeing other people do what I'm doing. Like, it's like a natural, like, insecurity and like thing that I try to get over. I really, really want to, I strive to be a better person and support everybody, even though sometimes I'm just competitive. Like, there's just no way around it. So, but I like it.
And if you weren't that way, you probably wouldn't produce the level of work that you produce.
Absolutely.
Most likely, you know?
There's just no way, like I said, the Michael Jordan thing, he was always there first and always there at the end. And he worked harder than anybody else. And so that's, I don't know if I work harder than anybody else, but I work really, really hard on this stuff. And I put a lot of time into it. So I think you're right. Sometimes when you that competitive and work that hard, so it can be really good for you, but then it can also count against you where you feel like you're a little negative about things sometimes. So, but I try really hard to try to like be kind and give people compliments, especially when they deserve it, especially if I'm really upset that I wasn't there for it. Like it's hard if I see a great tornado time lapse that someone posted and I wasn't there and I didn't get it. Like, it sucks. Part of me doesn't want to comment because I'm pissed I wasn't there. But I know, but there are a lot of people out there that like my time lapse stuff and they're trying to get into it. And so when I comment and they're like, oh yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. Like, I'm trying to kind of do some of that stuff because you've inspired me. I'm like,
right.
shit. I'm like, okay, like it's nice to hear. And I also am happy that I can try to support other people. So I try my best. I'm not the greatest yet. I'm trying to get there.
I mean, dude, like when you say, oh yeah, like I've licensed, endless clips to the BBC and National Geographic. It's like, from my standpoint, that's just like, dude, that's what I want. Like, that's what I would like. You know what I mean? And I know there's other people that are like, that I don't know that there's, like, when Martin Heck was telling me about, he was like, I knew that I was licensing this volcano time lapse to this BBC. I don't remember what the name of the program was. And he, I guess he like wasn't totally sure how they were going to use it. And he's like, and I'm watching it, and there's what's his face? David Attenborough is like narrating my film, and he was like, you could tell even today he was so geeked about it. Like he was just so. Dude, that's the pinnacle.
I've had so many good things happen. I have so many awesome like stories that I could share of all this stuff. But like just this last year, the 7 Worlds. One Planet came out. That was the one. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, he was in that one?
He was I guess it was a volcano eruption shot.
Yeah. So in the North America episode, the whole intro to that episode, except for one clip, was all my time lapse, like everything. Dude. And he's talking over it and narrating. And then it's like North America with like my Grand Canyon time lapse in the background. And I'm like, and like, to me, like I've had a lot of good stuff happen. So I'm like, that was pretty awesome. Like, I don't know. But then I shared it and other people were more freaked out about it than me, because Attenborough's like, freaking living legend. He's like LeBron James of like nature documentaries.
Right.
So
there will never be another David
They're like,
Attenborough.
Mike, you had the whole opening and he's the one narrating it. They're like, I don't know what else you could do. And I'm like, I don't know. Like it's, so it's sometimes, I mean, this is my business. So a lot of good things happen to me because I've been doing it a while and I have this stuff out there. So sometimes I get used to it. Like, okay, a Porsche commercial wants to use this clip. Okay. Like, I just not like, and I license through Film Supply. So a lot of stuff happens that I don't really have a part of. It just kind of will get licensed by these things. But I try to like really, really like appreciate all this stuff and not let it, like go, whatever, like whatever, just another thing. Like because it's important. It's a big deal. Like I never got into this for that. It just
mindfulness.
It's important. It's important. If you see too many people, that get real cocky and complacent and act like they're the best at all this stuff. And it's, I don't want to be that person. And I'm like I said, I'm too insecure. I suck. I feel like I suck so much that I don't ever think I'll ever get, I don't know if I have to worry about it too much. I don't know.
Well, I guess on the flip side, if you get over that, maybe you can start selling $7 million.
Dude, I can't ever do that. I can't even see. That's my problem, is I can't even get into the print stuff because I do too much of the time lapse stuff. I haven't been able to focus on that. I would love a whole other wing of like, trying to get my work into like to architects for like commercial buildings, and especially around Arizona, people love storms. I'm like, there's so many things I'd love to try to like get my hands in. I don't have the time or energy. I got 3 kids, and when I'm not doing this, I'm trying to not just be busy.
I bet you could do it eventually, though. I bet if you did some kind of like, if you took like one photo from all of your most favorite storms, and then you just said it was from like this particular, like I think there's some sort of marketing play that you can do there between. Like,
I think so. I mean, you go into dentist offices and medical places, and you see art on the wall of like different things, and I'm like, man, I bet they would love to have a bunch of storm photos on the wall for Arizona and from Arizona, and but it's I don't know. I don't know how to go.
What's his name? David Yarrow. You walk in and you sell a $30,000 print or whatever it is that he does.
My friend Justin Turvine, he does that. He's always like posting like he's always delivering like a giant, like 100-inch metallic print to like a car dealership in Dallas. And it's like a city skyline of Dallas, and they put it in their freaking lobby. And I'm like, that's freaking great. Like I got to figure out how to do that here. So
one of those a month. You're good.
That'd be awesome. All right, man, I better let you go. I'll stop talking. I think I probably kept you longer than you wanted. So.
No, dude, it's all good. I'll tell you. Well, I'll leave you with this. We've mentioned Martin Heck a couple times.
Yeah.
I would love if somehow the two of you guys could like collaborate on something, because I feel like you have such a complimentary stuff that you do. Yeah. I don't know what the hell you would do.
I have no idea. I'm trying to figure out ways to like collaborate with other people like Pecos. Like I would love, people would probably freak out if Pecos and I did a video together because people love Pecos, and he and I got to be good friends. But yeah, we could do something. Mike Meswell is another guy who was, he's trying to time lapse stuff. And I'm like, dude, go crazy time lapse in the Milky Way and landscapes, and we'll do some kind of monster thing. So like a regional thing. Do one person handles the Milky Way and the sunrises and whatever, Yeah. We've talked about that stuff. It's just kind of hard to come up with something, but yeah, I would love to do something with him. He's really young too. I was talking to Martin, I was like asking him questions and advice about something sometime. And then I realized he's like 20, he was like 20 something. I'm like, dude, I'm 40. I'm asking advice from you.
Well, he's such a brain with hardware smart. And stuff. Yeah. He knows so much.
Yeah. That's the stuff that I don't get into the technical side when it gets to cameras and even all the editing and stuff. Like if I can get stuff to work for me, I'm happy. But some people go way beyond that. They get way into it. He's one of those guys, and I just can't get there. My head just won't go that far.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, dude, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it, Mike. Sincerely, I really do.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad I can finally make it happen to you.
Yeah. Yes. Let's keep in touch, and I'll definitely, shoot you the link as soon as I upload it.
All right, man. Thanks a lot for having me on. Have a great day.
You too.
We'll talk to you later.